Once upon a time, there was a small, at first glance unremarkable skeleton. A beautiful girl in a short skirt introduces herself. Her name is Song Chushuan. She ties a bow on the bandage she wears always above her left knee. She looks lovely, full of strength and vigor. In her right hand, she holds a thin twig with a leaf. The young and capable Song Chushuan will show this magical, crisis-ridden continent how to trap top-level undead in the danger zone. This is a headless horseman who looks really awesome and mesmerizing. He has a red cloak fluttering on his back, and in his hand he holds a big and sharp sword. You should know that without the skills to hunt these creatures, looking into their eyes will not last you 10 seconds. First, you need to find the lost headless horseman and the horse that wanders lonely, and then give him what he wants to be able to get his attention. For example, a men's magazine for adults. When he falls for it, attack him sharply to discourage him and not give him time to recover. The attacking girl is really good looking, and she yells that she's going to take him with her now. He clearly didn't expect it. Now there is a slave contract for an indefinite period of time. There is a signature and a large hieroglyph in the middle, and they are in the form of a brightly glittering seal. The joyful and assertive Song Chuan sits right on top of this captured skeleton, holding its arms and not giving it a chance to break free. The deed is done. The girl gives him a friendly wink and informs him that he is now a knight from now on. The headless horseman washes his bones in a body of water. Now he is captured, so he is weakened. Now he has to be very careful, or he will simply collapse. It is dangerous to sit on top of it and rush at high speed to meet new adventures. If that happens and the bones fall apart, then these two will only hurt themselves that way. The girl Song Chushuan forcefully ripped apart the ropes that bound her hands and feet. This way they can get into a dangerous situation where Sun may end up tied up and abandoned in some dingy cave. But don't worry about it, even if you don't know what to do, because this headless horseman might have some idea and plan to save you. His influence can attract other monsters that can assist in matters. And fearlessness will literally make you fly. And he and the monster can taste first blood. So, was everyone now able to learn the lesson of headless horseman hunting from young Song Chushuang? Now you really can be unafraid to take your first step towards saving the world. This is really coming out an exciting story. But it's getting weird. There's a bright light behind the skeleton. It's guessing something. The thing is, he's no headless horseman. Just a skeleton who lost his head while he was washing up. As soon as he can find his lost head, he will escape from the clutches of this devilish woman at once. He has his own life and business to attend to. He admits that he himself is really just a little skeleton who doesn't have to be ready for all these adventures. This continent is indeed huge in size and mysterious, and there are plenty of dark places in it. The people who live here are only one of many races. They have beautiful buildings by the sea, near the mountain range. There are many mysterious places on the continent. There are huge monuments against a backdrop of mountains with rugged paths between them. Only birds fly there most of the time. There is a race of dangerous dark mages who can control all sorts of ferocious creatures. There is also a race of demons on the continent. There are wolf-like creatures with red eyes and puffy tails. They live in watery areas. This includes the undead, who are also often found among various bodies of water in remote abandoned areas. There are many dangers here. Even a seemingly ordinary small skeleton can be life-threatening. The girl introduces herself. Her name is Song Chushuan, and she wears a bandage with a bow on her leg. Song Kuan is the best sorceress. She is confident in herself and her exceptional abilities. She also always looks beautiful. A young girl proudly declares that humans are her glory, and in order to survive in this world, she has to do a lot of things. She reads the sheet for useful information that might come in handy. It says that demons often plague the mountains of death. If she can sell their armor, it will help her hometown of Wuyin. She decides to put demon extermination on her to-do list, and while looking out of the bushes, move on somewhere else. She can't believe her eyes. A lone headless horseman is walking right in front of her. In fact, the headless horseman is one of the strongest undead. His power is so great that he can destroy an entire city by himself. They adhere to their established principles, so they are judges in the undead world. Song Chushuan notices that this rider's appearance is not the best. He must be weakened from the long war that had recently taken place and was looking for his lost horse. The young sorceress decides to take advantage of this situation and make a pact to make him her slave. He will then guard her city of Wuyin and keep her safe. Song Chushuan tosses a magazine right in front of the headless rider. He notices it. This is a men's adult magazine that features an attractive skeleton of a woman in lingerie on the cover. The rider doesn't have time to realize and move away before the sorceress jumps on him. She is very attractive and wears a short skirt. Sun jumps on top, her legs spread. She laughs. Now this undead thing has nowhere to run. It lies at the bottom and can't get out. She exclaims joyfully that this tired rider can resist all he wants. But now he will still stay with her. Here a slave contract is drawn up in the form of a brightly gleaming seal with many symbols. Chushuang laughs and doesn't let the skeleton get out. He can't do anything about it and refused the contract. The deed is done, now this headless horseman is her knight. She sits right on his shoulders and instructs him to run fast forward. He is her faithful steed who will do what she says. The rider rushes quickly. The enchantress exclaims that in the name of her and her hometown, they are going straight to the mountains of death. They run into a bleak, rocky area that not everyone will be able to get out of so easily. A fire has been built on the ground, and a huge skull of a creature with large and sharp horns hangs over the entrance inside. Suddenly, a blue demon appears in front of them, hitting the skeleton hard with a stick right on the skeleton and making a loud sound. The skeleton's bones fly apart. The sorceress stopped in bewilderment. How come? In front of her lay a pile of bones with clothes, and opposite stood an evil demon. She's shaking in confusion and doesn't know what to do next. She had not expected such a sudden turnaround. She is grabbed and led by the hands of two demons. She is now their hostage. She swears and is terrified. What the hell? Where is her loyal knight now? Scattered skeleton bones lie on the ground. He says he warned her that he is not any kind of headless horseman. He's just a common skeleton who lost his head. How could she expect him to defeat all of them? Capturing Song Chushuan, the two demons escort her deep into the cave and inform their General Lun that they have arrived. She is a full and strong female demon with black horns and sharp fangs and bones hanging from her belly. She stands in her white slippers and asks what happened. Why are her subjects so noisy? One of the demons cheerfully informs her that he has brought her booty in the form of a human girl and a headless horseman. The demon points to a pile of bones lying on the ground, which are wrapped in a green cloak. General Lun is all excited. She sticks out her tongue and smiles widely, drooling. Let them bring her a human girl as soon as possible. Lun wants to have fun with her. But what to do with those bones? Where do we put them? General Moon orders her cutie to be fed them. All the bones are intact, but they're disconnected from each other. The demon throws the bones hard and with a great clatter to the ground again. The undead are all bewildered. The rider asks himself, why did this happen to him today? How did this happen? The captured slave stands under the bright beam from above and introduces himself. His name is Gu Xiaobai, and he is an ordinary skeleton in plain clothes. Today, as usual, he was bathing at his house, amidst the many rocks, lamps, and huge bones in the back. But suddenly after washing, he found that his head had disappeared somewhere. He only had time to put on his clothes. With the help of telepathy, Gu Xiaobai went in search of his head, and as a result, his body left the land of the departed. Eventually, the skeleton was grabbed by this devilish girl and made into her slave. Fortunately, their skeletons are so arranged that they collapse when danger arises to avoid potential fractures. These skeletons cannot be killed as long as the fire of the soul burns within them. It burns blue. However, picking up the body causes wear and tear on the bones, so this should not be done frequently. Suddenly, the skeleton lights up. What's going on? He got the feeling of his head coming back to his body. In front of him was an empty passage with a light in the cave. Could it be that she had already returned to him? But then why can't Gu Xiaobai feel her? He tries to find her with his hands on top of him, but there's nothing. The head from the body. He needs her. Small lights burn in her eyes with a blue color. Gu Xiaobai comes to a blissful feeling around him. He feels that his head is actually coming back to him. In front of him stands a huge and vicious dog with brightly burning eyes, wearing a large collar with sharp spikes and holding a skeleton head in its mouth. The skeleton sits in the cave and feels it all. He is happy about this turn, even though it is quite unusual. The vicious dog looks right at him and stands very close to him. He opens his mouth wide with sharp fangs. The dog spits out Gu Xiaobai's head, on which a large amount of dog saliva is now dripping down. The skeleton sits with his hands together and trusts that his head will come back and he will be whole again. The huge dog leans forward puzzled and looks at the scattered bones of the skeleton. Song Kushuan begs her not to do this. She's not a spy at all, just a little girl asking to be allowed to leave. But General Lun shouts not to lie to her. It's immediately obvious by her body. She sits high on her throne and looks directly at the sorceress. The demon general's eyes light up. This girl is just a good and fresh human being to her. Sun is frustrated. She didn't succeed in fooling this demon with her beauty. What should she do now? But the demon starts smiling sweetly with his mouth full. In fact, he was completely fooled. Lun can't contain himself anymore. This girl is too cute. The general pounces sharply and with a shout at this girl. She now intends to expose her. Song Chushuan's binding ropes on her hands burst. She was puzzled by the surprise. On her legs, the ropes are also coming apart. Her panties are visible under her skirt. The girl shudders all over. The young sorceress has clear eyes and an innocent expression. She watches to see what will happen next. Chushuang sits half naked and starts screaming hard. She is scared and the demon general lunges forward. The girl tries to fight back somehow. The sorceress, both crying huge tears and angry at the same time, she clenched her teeth tightly. Song Chushuan clenched her fist tightly. She says to the general, "Does she even know how much this suit of hers even cost?" This demon doesn't even have enough money earned in a lifetime to pay for it. But the general responds by grabbing the girl's leg firmly with his hand. She says that there is no need to be angry, because this is just the beginning. The sorceress is at a loss. She's propped up against a wall with a large shadow of a joyous demon on it. The girl looks ahead and wonders now if he will do it. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a skeleton sits and thinks he's not just going to die here. There's this horrible connection between him and the sorceress. But what should he do now? This dog has brought him his head, but he won't give it back. The dog flirts with him and licks him. Gu tries to reach up with his hand and take his head away, but Dog swats it away with his paw. The huge dog still has his head in his mouth and shows that he wants something. Gu Xiaobai doesn't understand what he means. What intentions could this dog have with his head? The assembled skeleton sits with its legs tucked up against itself and resting against the wall that the shadow falls on. What does this dog want with him then? The dog shows with his paw that he means to throw the skeleton head for a game to properly stretch and run around. Gu Xiaobai crossed his arms in thought. This is his head. It should be with him. His head cannot serve this dog as a ball for play and fun in this cave. Suddenly the undead illuminate. It could save the girl he has a contract with. The demon servant is walking in the cave with a bucket and a mop in his hands. He's a little sad. He has to wash the general's pet again. He is indignant and says that this stinky dog with a terrible temper does his business wherever he wants. Suddenly the demon snaps and drops everything. A skeleton head flying at him for some reason. He can't believe his eyes. Is he holding some skeleton skull in his hands right now? Suddenly this big dog jumps out high above him with a skeleton sitting on his back with a whip in his hand. The dog is fully extended. She's huge in size and she has sharp claws. It is really dangerous to stand in its path. There is a loud sound from the movement of this skeleton dog next to the demon. This dog with sharp claws crushes the demon and lots of blood pours out in all directions. A pleased Gu Xiaobai is delighted with this. He praises the dog and calls him a good doggy. He strokes his head. The dog is overjoyed. I don't know why, but this dog seems to really like the skeleton's head. He recalls the whole head situation again. When he was washing, the dog apparently snuck up on him and pulled his head off. His past owner must not have played with him, and so the dog was sad and went in search of some toys. So, the skeleton will now be his new owner. He's sitting on top of a dog, holding a whip with his head on the end of it, and the dog runs after it. He's happy with this game. Gu Xiaobai thinks back. Where is the culprit that caused him to find himself in this place? Two more demons run out with cold weapons in their hands. They want to find out what happened to the doghouse. They stop and stare in amazement. A skull suddenly appears right in front of them. Gu Xiaobai controls this dog with his head, which has to catch her. Most importantly, the skeleton screams for the dog not to break it. The dog doesn't stop and instantly commits a double murder at once, with lots of blood underneath again. They need to save the young sorceress in time. The skeleton has the ability to sense that girl with the slave contract, so he senses that she's somewhere ahead. He stops and hears some sound from far away. There are moans and cries for help. The dog is in full jump. He runs for all he's worth. He is loyal and happy to serve his new playful owner. Gu Xiaobai yells out that this maiden's rider is already rushing to help her. He only hopes not to be too late. The enchantress is just happy and has a whip in her hand. She laughs and tells the demon to keep crying and moaning. She calls her a filthy pig, who must have enjoyed such treatment from a beautiful woman. The girl's leg from above presses down on the general, who screams and moans that he is about to die. Song Chushuan is even more enthusiastic. This is not the end, and the fun is just beginning. A large shadow can be seen on the wall in the cave, and Sun now orders it to turn around. The skeleton and the dog stop and observe the whole scene. They certainly didn't expect this. They turn around and walk away. Gu Xiaobai says they were just passing by. But the sorceress screams to be waited on and taken along. She doesn't want to stay here without them. She instantly sheds her sexy form to taunt the demon. Gu Xiaobai picks up on that. The girl was able to do it in one flick. Pretty good. General Moon now grins and comes to her senses. What went wrong? She orders her devil to tear these two to pieces. She has a whip in her hand and points her finger right at them. The general got to her feet, but the dog hits the demon so hard with his paw that it flies far away and leaves a large trail of blood behind it. The demon lies on the ground and emits a gasp. The skeleton is surprised to look at him, though his mistress is no better either. Song Kushuan resents the skeleton. What did he just say? She explains that since they are bound by a contract, the sorceress can hear all of his thoughts. Chu Shuang pounces on him, but the skeleton only laughs back. He wants to justify that he actually meant something else. The girl says she can forget about it for now, and she is willing to forgive him. After all, Gu Xiaobai saved her from the demon. Now it's time to run, shouts the enchantress to her headless horseman. An army of demons stares at them, between which they fly by on a healthy dog. Gu Xiaobai reminds him that he's just a little skeleton, and he needs to give back his head. The next day in the early morning, mountainous terrain behind a wall of bricks. The sun is rising. The main gateway to the city. There is no one around except birds flying overhead against the sky. The man yawns awake. Today is another normal, peaceful day again. A few birds are flying near the branches of a tree and chirping loudly. The weather is nice today. The guards notice one cat flirting with a cat from afar and call him a ladies' man. A girl is rushing down the road with a rider on a devil dog. She looks very happy. The guard knights look at each other confusedly. They are in thought. One of them is shouting at the top of his voice and cursing. There's a real devil dog in front of them. The guard rings the city bells loudly to wake everyone up quickly. He sounds the alarm and shouts to report the attack on them. The mayor of the city and General Ren Yuan should know about this as soon as possible. But the girl wants to stop them and yells loudly at them. It's not what they thought. The beautiful enchantress is heading towards the city and doesn't want to raise the alarm because of her. She introduces herself. Her name is Song Chushuan. She is a local and from the Song family. She puts her hand up to stop the panic. The girl sits on top of a huge dog with a skeleton together. It has an intimidating look. She's showing her demon general's plaque. She's here on urgent business for the general of this city. The man scrutinizes and makes sure it is indeed the nameplate of the demon general. General Duming Ren Yuanyu sits on his throne in the hall. He announces that according to the stipulation, this enchantress can receive a reward of 30,000 silver. But the girl replies that she's being overpraised. It is her sacred duty to fight for peace in all mankind. Gu Xiaobai stands behind her and notices her deftly wagging her tail in front of the general. The mayor of Wuyan City, Li Qing, is a little puzzled. He asks, "Is her contract servant a headless horseman?" Looking at the way he looks, the mayor is puzzled. Duming Ren Yuanyu offers the sorceress to return the demon general's tablet. He wants to know if it's really the same headless horseman. The sorceress with the skeleton is standing in front of a large gate, with a devil dog to the left next to them. Gu Xiaobai candidly admits that he is indeed decrepit, and it is noticeable by him. A young and joyful sorceress enters the city. He says she is returned. She is all glowing with joy. The bat can't get their huge dog through the aisle. He makes a noise. He can't stay like that either. Skeleton Gu Xiaobai throws his dog's head so he can jump over the wall. They should be able to do it. The devil dog happily barked. He loves such games with Gu Xiaobai's favorite head. The dog has no difficulty and follows the simplest putti. He runs forward and smashes through the wall with a clatter. Song Chushuan grabbed at his skeleton's clothes in a rage. Gu Xiaobai! How could he order a toddler to break the wall of her house? The skeleton is shaking and doesn't understand what his fault is, or who the little guy even is. Baby is the dog's new name given to him by the sorceress. She curses at the baby and kicks him. Next time he won't get any more food. The dog feels guilty and howls. Skeleton stands behind her and doesn't understand. There shouldn't be a contract between them. The sorceress turns to her skeleton again and says that he should continue to pretend to be a headless horseman from now on, and in the meantime, Chushuan will hide his head. The skeleton is mortified. Does the sorceress want to threaten him and have him be her bones for the rest of his life? Sun blurts out that it's nothing of the sort. Someone from behind calls out to the young beauty. The arrival was right in Miss Sun's style. She even managed to break through the courtyard wall. It's a beautiful noblewoman standing between two other guys. She had heard that the sorceress had left the city in order to find a servant for herself, but was only able to make a contract with some common skeleton. The enchantress replies, "Does the noblewoman know why this is the case?" Gu Xiaobai blurts out that it's intuition. Chushuan tells him that he's a blabbermouth. The skeleton asks, "Who is this girl, and why is she talking to her like that?" "This is Lu Xiaoxiao. She went to the same school as the sorceress." Song Chushuan girl is bright and good-looking. She knows her own worth and her friends. It's already getting dark, and that's why the enchantress has to give up her dinner with Liu Xiaoxiao. The sister flirts and says she heard Sun make a contract with the Headless Horseman. She just wants to show her respect. Sun replies that he prefers not to brag much, but it is indeed the same rider. The other guys laugh at her. How can she not be afraid to brag like that? Usually this girl wanders around the cities, but how did she dare to set foot on the perishing ground to get a new pet? Liu Xiaoxiao notices that her sister talks about it so easily. They all want to see this new servant of hers already. Suddenly, with a loud clang, the same headless horseman with a sword in his hand appears. He sits riding a huge, vicious dog with claws and wearing a collar with sharp spikes. The well-groomed girl can't believe it. She sees a real devil dog in front of her. It really is the headless horseman. All the people are starting to shy away in terror. This whole crew really does look great, all shiny around them, and you better watch out for them. Enchantress Chushuan says, "Were they able to see properly? Now they can get out of here." Liu Xiaoxiao becomes furious. She blurts out that Song was just lucky, and that's it. She pulls up her long dress and rushes away as fast as she can. Song Chushuan only has time to wave her handkerchief in her wake. Gu Xiaobai stands proudly on one knee on the devil dog and holds a large sword in his hand. He asks if the sorceress is all right now. She replies with satisfaction. What does he think to himself? Enchantress Sun remonstrates and asks where did the skeleton get that sword? It's straight from the demon general's tent. Doesn't a skeleton deserve a weapon like this? He comes down from the vicious dog. The skeleton tells him that this sword is actually a bit broken and is only worth a penny. Song Chushuang becomes furious upon hearing this. She can sell this broken sword for just some pennies? Does he want to die? The girl turns around and leaves. Now she needs to rest and sleep. She asks not to be disturbed. The little guy starts digging the ground underneath him with his claws. Gu Xiaobai is outraged. What kind of master is she if she leaves her servant to be dismembered? He asks the little guy why he needs to dig the ground. This skeleton is not his stock. The dog wags his tail in joy and licks the entire skeleton. Gu asks for it to stop. The angry Chushuan returns to them and calls out to the skeleton. The enchantress finds out what they have going on here. Why Gu Xiaobai can't be quieter. She sees the dog chewing on the skeleton's clothes and burying it with the head lying nearby. Sun can't figure out where the skeleton has gone. Gu Xiao replies that perhaps it is the demon general's ghost taking revenge on him. All three of them look down. What ghost could we be talking about? Someone notices the feat and talks about it. The whole team goes into shock and backs away. How is this possible? A talking sword? The sword angrily shouted out that Gu Xiaobai had broken it. He was sleeping well in the ground, but someone took him and dug him up, and then also brought him to the continent. He had been through a lot along the way and had been taking care of himself the whole time. And now he's being used again. Fuck knows when he'll want to help him now. But right now, he only had the urge to poke him good. Although he's a skeleton, he wouldn't care. The headless horseman can't believe it. It's a talking sword. Song Chushuan hears all these words. The sword tells why he is now feared? He talks about how he appeared 18 generations ago. But the skeleton is starting to get annoyed by all this, and wants to sell it faster. The enchantress comes to a childish delight. How could the sword have appeared so long ago? Is it still famous? Gu Xiao reassures her. Despite such an age, the sword looks superb and all shining. It confirms its renown. Back then, it was one of the 10 most famous swords. Changfeng Jian. Skeleton Xiaobai takes the sword in his hand and slams it hard against the ground. The others look on in bewilderment. The sword is in extreme pain. It's screaming for Gu to stop. Otherwise, he's really going to break now. The sword crackles, hitting the rocks with force. This is an embarrassing situation for all of them. Gu Xiaobai is cursing. The sorceress is also puzzled. A happy song. Chushuan serves 2 deep plates of food for dinner. She laughs. The sorceress loudly puts them on the table. White steam comes out of the soup plates. The girl sits at the table with the skeleton, with the huge head of their baby sticking out to the left. There is also a sword on the table. Everyone is fully assembled for dinner. On the table is a deep plate of hot green soup. There's a thick steam above it. Enchantress Song Chushuan is happy to court her new guest. Let him help himself. She cordially says not to thank Gu Xiaobai, but to just eat. Skeleton teased. He wasn't even going to thank her. She's so economical after all. How can you get full of it? He tells her to also pay attention to her breasts. It looks as if the young girl is stunted. A furious sorceress pounces on her slave and wants to twist his head off. A sword comes to her defense. He thinks the girl is pretty good. A bowl of soup overturns and falls to the floor. Sun hears this and wants to make the skeleton take back his insulting words, but he responds by asking for his head to be released. Sword laughs broadly and concludes that a straight and flat shape like himself is the most perfect figure. The skeleton almost gives out a gasp and the girl becomes confused. She didn't expect such a turn. She pounces on the sword with all her might and stabs it into the floor with a clatter. The sword buckles. He screams loudly and violently in agony. He is really in pain. Unexpected rage from Song Chushuan. Now he just lies on the floor and says he's dead. After a blow like that, he's not sweet at all. The girl leaves after doing her job and doesn't even think about turning around. Let her sleep sweetly. The enraged Chushuan walks out of the house into the street, and Gu Xiaobai is left standing pensively at the table in front of the sword. Meanwhile, Xiaobai had managed to read a book about ancient weapons, and Cheng Fengjian's top 10 sword was described as sharp and indestructible. This was an interesting find. Cheng Fengjian looks like a short blade. Gu touches it with his hands, rubbing it and examining it closely. He picks it up and shakes it slightly. What will he say now? The little boy watches them from behind. The sword speaks again. He sees the ordinary skeleton trying to play the role of a headless horseman and advises him not to joke around like that. Cheng Fengjian laughs loudly. Gu Xiaobai concludes after saying this that Song Chushuan still took pity on him. Fengjian recklessly replies that this is why the ordinary skeleton is so smart. Skeleton makes the decision to care for the girl at least a little after he becomes her servant. Suddenly, the dog from behind opened its mouth and stuck the skeleton's head in there. Xiaobai was surprised at this suddenness. Does the little guy really want to play with him again? The town of Wuyin the next day. Several people going about their business. A woman and a man are chatting in front of a large building. The young female employee behind the desk is doing the reception. Gu Xiaobai applied to her for registration as a mercenary, stating that he was already 18 years old. The worker does a reconciliation of the data, carefully rereads everything and asks again if everything is correct. The clothed and disguised skeleton agrees. The female staff member greets him and asks him to confirm his identity. But Gu Xiaobai refuses, citing that he lost his passport on the battlefield. In that case, she needs to know his home address. But the skeleton replies that the world is big and he is at home everywhere. A co-worker is making notes on a document. She seems to have figured it out. The clothed skeleton begins to worry and speaks to his sword through telepathy. He suspects that the employee is doubting him and will not issue a mercenary license now. The girl realizes that he is still young and inexperienced, and his face is completely covered. He even has bandages on his hands. What can one say about such a man? She thinks this young gentleman is from the family and decided to play mercenaries. Only it's not child's play anymore. The girl cordially gives him a mercenary license and wishes him a good mission. Gu Xiaobai can't believe that everything has really worked out. He decides to immediately start running errands and earning a living for his patroness. Gu Xiaobai stands among the others and looks at the available tasks. The first level of mercenaries is Black Iron. He chooses a mission for himself. The first mission is to catch a fat cat. The ad has a picture of him lying on his back and happy. He's holding a small fish. The second mission is about the same cat. It already talks about a white cat that was kidnapped by him. The third ad says that all the fish drying by the door was eaten by some fat cat. Next came a fat cat. He makes chickens run and dogs fly, asking for a reward. Skeleton is standing in front of the board and can't figure out why all the ads here are about the same cat. How is it possible that this cat is still alive? I mean, he's got half the town after him. Suddenly, Cheng Fengjiang's sword lights up. He seems to have smelled the scent of that same ginger-striped fat cat. The skeleton shakes his sword and wants to find out how he got such an excellent sense of smell. Cheng directly senses that the cat is somewhere to his left, and let Gu Xiaobai better not ask him how he does it. The new mercenary estimates that each mission gets a reward of somewhere between 2 and 3 dozen. All he has to do is catch a cat. It's a nice day outside. A beautiful fountain is in the middle. People are walking around. On the upper tier of the fountain, someone is lying down and resting. It's a fat ginger cat lying with one leg over the other. He's savoring the fish. Xiaobai pulls out the ad and checks the image on it against the cat now lying in front of him. The drawing is a bit odd, but you can clearly see that this is the fat cat he wants. The cat also notices him and winks. He is full of energy and vigor. He jumps on Gu's head and immediately figures out that the skeleton in front of him is a skeleton working as a mercenary in the city, and the sword Cheng Fengjiang, who went missing over 100 years ago. It doesn't look like this cat is afraid in any way at all. On the contrary, he's playing on the skeleton's head. It was as if Gu Xiaobai was waking up and couldn't understand when the cat had managed to jump on him and pull this kind of thing off. He makes a sudden movement to grab the cat, but to no avail. The mercenary can't believe the cat understands human speech. He even immediately realized who Gu really was. This cat is really very strong. Sword Fengjiang also recognizes him. This is indeed the cat they need. This cat has lived for hundreds of years, and yet it can talk. It's all very strange. Xiaobai turns to the sword. Since it's his familiar, it will help him deal with the cat. The skeleton approaches and sweetly addresses the cat. All he needs is one small favor. The cat asks what he needs to do. He suggests he return to his master and they split the reward in half. Sword Cheng observes what is happening and expresses his disdain for all of this. The cat smiles sweetly in return and pretends to understand perfectly. It seems to be a small favor that won't cost him much effort. But there's a catch. The skeleton stands in awe and hope. He's willing to try and make concessions. The cat looks at him sternly and informs him that he refuses the offer. Immediately, he bounces off the fountain with a whoosh and wind. He repeats once more that he refuses and warns that he will not agree under any conditions. The cat smirks and is already far in the air away from the skeleton. The skeleton is left only to sit in the same spot on the fountain with his legs tucked under him. Xiaobai is cursing. That ginger cat runs too fast, it's impossible to keep up with him. He's already far behind the fence, somewhere in the bushes. Sword tries to calm him down. As far as he knows, this guy isn't easy to catch, so doing this assignment is questionable. But the skeleton interrupts him. He made the observation that a fat cat is only problematic for rich people. According to the ranking of the rich people of Wuying City, the cat's next goal is to get married. Sword doesn't understand how the skeleton could know such information. The mercenary continues. Now they just need to infiltrate the wedding and get their reward for catching this nimble cat. But the sword has objections. You can only talk about it so easily. Who's going to let them walk in there like that? But Gu Xiaobai doesn't doubt himself. He will definitely not be rejected. Later, a sign with hieroglyphics is attached to a structure. It's the same mansion. A peaceful man stands at the entrance with a bird on his shoulder. Suddenly he hears a sound. He goes into a panic and screams at the top of his voice, and the bird's feathers fall off. He can't believe who's in front of him. The man can't find himself out of fear. He turns all pale and stands with his mouth open. A mercenary stands before him with a devil dog by his side. And the sword appeals that the young master has returned. Shouldn't the man be informed? A few minutes ago, map of the estate showing the necessary passage with a red arrow. Dressed mercenary Gu Xiaobai stands in full readiness and studies this map he holds in his hands. Judging by the map, if the cat did sneak into the manor, he must have jumped into said remote alley. Sword says that the skeleton was not only able to find out about the manor, but also to get a map of it. Gu Xiaobai scrutinizes the black and white map of this estate. He figures it's unlikely he'll be able to get in now with his abilities, so he needs to make a plan. The devil dog also lies not far from them in the very alley he can barely fit into. Sword Chung Fengjian resentfully wondered how it was possible to bring along such a stupid, sluggish dog with all this. Skeleton says that Fengjian once mentioned that it was a level 8 devil dog. Come to think of it, there is no one in Vuan that can even come close to matching this beast. Chung actually confirms it. He really didn't notice anything like that. The skeleton pondered further. Dooming Ren Yuanyu clearly sensed someone stronger than the 8th level. This is an interesting and useful observation for them. This fat cat is very agile, but it remains unknown how strong it is. Meanwhile, above them, the same cat jumps leisurely down the alley. Gu Xiaobai heard something. What happened? He looks forward questioningly. The skeleton then abruptly turns around in bewilderment and looks up, trying to find out the cause of the rustling. Did it seem like a skeleton? Just then, a cat flew over them in a strange pose. The sword confirms that it's hardly a hallucination. Gu sharply called out to his little boy. Now it was his turn. Let him act according to the plan. But the dog is sluggish and doesn't want to wake up. He yawns loudly toward the skeleton. Skeleton devises a special approach to the devil dog. If he does it right, he can get a portion of Xiaobai's radish soup in the evening. But the dog immediately turns away from him and doesn't even want to hear anything like that. The mercenary urges him to hurry up. What could he possibly be dissatisfied with here? But Chung Fengjian says that the skeleton just doesn't understand his soul, even though it can be seen. Sword whispers to the kid that tonight they can feast on a skeleton head with hot sauce. Xiaobai has heard everything. He threatens to sell such a sword as an ordinary kitchen sword to some chef now. Fengjian shrugs it off. Spicy food is not his taste. The dog immediately starts rushing around. Such an idea is now to his liking. After a while, the courtyard of the estate. In it, 2 guys are working diligently. They're picking up trash, but something distracts them. They look at their structure and can't figure out what shadow has appeared on it. They indignantly go to deal with the situation. One of them shouts that they should not have put the tray at the gate to the courtyard. But right in front of them is a huge devil dog. He lets out a fearsome, intimidating growl. The workers are out of their minds. They scream in panic and both turn pale in horror. Where could this have come from? Everyone present scurried off in different directions in horror, leaving a passageway for the dog. It's a devil dog. Why did it show up at their place in Vuan? All the people are greatly disturbed. One of the guards yells faster run to alert the estate guards. But suddenly he's stopped by the man's fully clothed hand. A mercenary with a sword stands proudly in front of the employee. He informs him that this is not necessary. A huge and ferocious dog has his tail on fire. Something must be done to him at once. A security guard stands in the building's passageway at a loss. He won't have time to call security. But Gu Xiaobai confidently comes to their rescue. He seems to know what to do. The determined mercenary stands to his full height right in front of the dog, saliva dripping from his mouth. The devil dog looks straight at Xiaobai. He growls menacingly. Everyone in the neighborhood is scared. But it's actually a clearly thought-out skeleton plan. The kid will deliberately create a situation that no one else can handle. Then at the right moment, a mercenary will show up and solve everything. He's the only one with the power to stop this whole mess. Next, he will show his strength and ride the hound, proudly raising his sword in front of everyone. The estate clerk will then cordially agree to let him inside without further questions. That way, the manor will thank him endlessly, and the skeleton in return will simply ask to stay there instead of rewarding him. Now it is time for Chung Fengjian's retort. The mercenary stands menacingly with his arms stretched forward. The children nearby are watching in horror. It's not something you see every day. One boy says this man just has 8th grade syndrome. What a shame. The girl also doesn't understand what he's doing? The skeleton is at a loss. Something didn't go according to plan. He turns to Chung Fengjian. Did the sword deliberately decide to make a fool of him? He looks around and is horrified to find his sword missing somewhere. This was not supposed to happen. Behind him, a man with a sword lurked behind the wall. I think he's the one who stole it. He smiles slyly and his eyes sparkle. This man looks like a cat. He even has fangs. And in his right hand, he's holding the very same sword Chung Fengjian. Who is he? And what is he planning to do now? Chung Fengjian comes to his senses and can't understand what is happening to him now. He's swearing a lot. Where did the hairy thief come from and why did he steal it? This man has a sly look, and his mouth is full of small, sharp fangs. What's he up to? He smiles slyly and looks closely at the sword. This man looks like a cat. He turns to the sword he now holds in his hand. What is this sword? Who is it? Ancient Sword Cheng can't believe his eyes. He seems to recognize this character, and is surprised how he is still alive. The cunning thief turns out to have cat feet, and with one of them, he gently holds Cheng by the blade. Feng Jian turned pale from such an unexpected encounter. He doesn't know what to say. Suddenly he curses and yells loudly. It's that nimble, stinky cat. He decided to turn into a human to play with a sword. The cat fastens the sword to his belt without thinking twice. He still has work to do. Gotta keep moving. Now the cat has to carry something. Would Cheng mind doing him a favor and escorting him? The man with the long mustache gratefully holds out a small box as a thank you to the noble knight for his helping hand. They are standing on a red carpet in a well-kept room. This is the head of the Cheng Shu family asking Gu Xiaobai to accept this gift from him. The clothed skeleton is glad that at least they didn't expose his deception. Besides, he's finally inside. He turns to the dog and orders him to stop so he doesn't go inside after him. The dog quickly runs off somewhere away. The head of the family cordially asks the noble knight to follow inside with him. Gu Xiaobai opens the box to see the gift. He doesn't understand, are these just ordinary securities of some kind? They look presentable and neatly folded. But the skeleton just notices that they look strange. He smirks, it wouldn't hurt anyway. He slips the securities into his pocket. Cheng Shi pondered for a moment. This knight just took the entire 500 silver pieces so easily and didn't even flinch. A knight like that has enough power to scare the hellhound away. 500 silver must be nothing to him. He cordially addresses Gu Xiaobai. It was fate that allowed them to meet. Since that's the case, he needs help for one thing. The head of the family needs to deliver something valuable, but he could not find a good guard for a long time. The clothed mercenary shows with a gesture, and clarifies what the question price of all this is. Cheng clasps his hands and bows. He thanks his new acquaintance. The mercenary confidently asks for a price of 10,000. It's a price he can agree to. But Cheng Sha humbly replies that if this knight can handle the task, 100,000 won't be a problem either. The skeleton is surprised at this turn of events. 100,000. So he bit off more than he can chew. He recalls that killing a demon general costs 30,000 silver. It turns out this mission will be an order of magnitude more dangerous than that one. Who will he have to deal with now? Surely this must involve an adventure with some ferocious and enormous monsters, especially for a weak skeleton with a sword. That's something to think about. The new acquaintances are standing indoors discussing business. Suddenly they hear a ringing sound. An employee comes in with terrible news. He reports that someone has stolen merchandise. The head of the family, Cheng Sha, starts swearing violently. He calls his servant names and asks why they should pay the money at all. It's a good thing he has his dear knight by his side. The leader has been robbed in broad daylight. He needs help getting his valuable goods back. Gu Xiaobai lifts his head. What's going on? Was he imagining it, or was that really the sound of a sword? This is not a good sign. Gu Xiaobai has to leave. A beautiful shining girl asks to be rescued. It's like she came from another world. She's wearing a dress and hiding her face behind her long hair. There is a bright blue light around her. She begs and pleads to be saved. But from what? The girl looks beautiful but strange. The knight and Cheng Shu stare in surprise at this figure that appeared out of nowhere in front of them. The skeleton realized who it was. It was a real ghost in front of them. A large, well-maintained school on a sunny afternoon with the mountain in the background. The school is surrounded by a fence. Song Chushuan is talking to someone inside the school. She is puzzled. Are there ghosts somewhere nearby? A friendly man with glasses sits at his desk. He thinks there are strange noises coming from his house. Sometimes a white haze appears and scares the hell out of him. You can also hear the sounds of a girl crying. Because of all this, he can't sleep for days. Chushuan extends his arm and yells for him to stop. Something doesn't add up. Why is Teacher Lee discussing this with his student? She's really puzzled. The thing is, he had managed to hear the news that Sun had made a contract with the Headless Horseman, and even defeated an army of demons. Now, she and only she will be able to help him in this case. They both laugh. There seems to be a certain common understanding between them. It's not an easy case, though. The girl's excited. This is what celebrity is like. How unexpectedly things are starting to come together. She immediately turns away and gets angry. Song Kuan thought she would be praised at school, but ended up asking for some kind of favor. Principal Lee continues to persuade her. If she succeeds in handling this case, she will receive a reward of 5 silvers. The sorceress salutes with glee and agrees to do whatever the principal asks her to do. Her body belongs entirely to the school. She immediately sets off to fulfill the order. Principal Lee gives the young girl the golden keys to the house she needs to go to. Enchantress Sun takes the key with joy and delight. The address is Nanyang Street, Block 4, Building 8. Suddenly, a man appears from behind and shouts out to Sir that a hellhound is rampaging through the city. Song Chuxuan flinches sharply, almost dropping the key. The guy says that this dog belongs to her, so she should be the one to do something about it now. They run out onto the road together and rush out to meet the dog. Chu Shuang scolds Gu Xiaobai because he was the one who stayed to look after him in her absence. Watching the dog is his job. Why couldn't he handle it? What happened at their place? If she gets her assignment cancelled because of this incident, he'll get the full brunt of it. The young sorceress is angry. Meanwhile, in the Chung family house, a hand clutched the neck of its head hard, and a loud cry for help could be heard. It is the ghost of a girl floating in the air. She has also lifted Chung Chung Shu, who is being strangled with one hand, high up as well. He is screaming for help. The ghost releases his hand from the man's neck. You can see blood on the man's face. He's gotten sick. Gu Xiaobai sees everything that is happening and decides what to do about the situation. Apparently, she has little interest in the skeleton. Still, he can't just stand there. He's thinking, how can he defeat this ghost? He turns to her. He says that he thought she wanted to be saved, but now she's killing herself for nothing. The ghost is all furious, with death and great anger in her eyes. She says that the man killed her himself. It was the head of the Chung Chung Shu family who did this to her. She's floating in resentment. Now Chung Chung is lying on the floor unconscious, and Gu Xiaobai is watching from the sidelines. Since it happens to be a personal story, then he should leave them and stay out of it. The mercenary abruptly turns around and is about to walk away from this house. He walks fast, but behind him for some reason that ghost girl is flying. Gu Xiaobai starts to accelerate and run fast. But the ghost is not lagging behind. She is still close behind him. The girl reaches out her hand. She seems to want to grab him and do something. She's all agitated. The skeleton rushes quickly, but can't get away from the girl. Xiaobai asks why she is chasing him. Her eyes are reddened. She can just smell some intimate scent coming from him. Gu assumes she means just the smell of his bones. There's plenty of that in the cemetery. He can even show you. It's right down the path. She's all shaky and asks if he hates her. Why does he answer her like that? Gu Xiaobai realizes that this ghost can really be dangerous. He keeps trying to hide from her somehow. The skeleton is surprised at her assumption. There's no way that could happen. He would never have thought of it. She embraces him from behind and intimidatingly asks why the skeleton is worried then. The agitated skeleton realizes that he's worried for a reason. After all, it's not every day they want to eat his soul. He finds something to say back to her. It's because Gu Xiaobai really loves her. The ghost girl is frozen in her musings for a moment with her mouth ajar. Her hair is becoming frizzy. A blush appears on her face, and an expression of complete innocent amazement. Her eyes sparkled with love and interest, and a bright yellow light appears in the chest area. She sighs. The ghost crosses her arms and covers her chest with them. She interjects, "Is this really true?" Gu Xiaobai is shaking slightly. He seems to have overdone it. What will happen now? How will she react? The girl looks on in amazement and just scoffs. How could anyone even think of that? Her and him? The skeleton now realizes that if he is rejected, he can say goodbye to his soul. The mercenary has nowhere to go. We have to do something now. We're gonna have to double down. That's right. It's the only option left. We should try it, see if it works. Skeleton confesses his total love. It's the truth. He loved her as soon as he saw her. Even all the organs of his body resonate in front of her. He is full of happiness and delight around her. The ghost interjects. How can that be true? I mean, he doesn't even have organs. What he really meant was that despite their being of different races, their souls spoke the same language. It was fate, it seemed, that had decided to bring them together. The ghost girl paused in thought. She clearly had a taste for this. The skeleton notices that he has managed to stun her with his beautiful speech after all. Now it's time for him to slip away. But suddenly she grabs him with her hand on his shoulder. The girl yells for him to stop. It won't be so easy to get away. Now the ghost has become very embarrassed and is looking at him shyly. She makes a confession that she likes him too. Therefore, the ghost asks the skeleton not to leave her from now on. She hopes for further reciprocation. The skeleton is stunned. He clearly didn't expect this turn of events. What should he do with her now? Chung Fengjian notices the news. He asks why this ghostly girl is following Gu Xiaobai. They're at Sun's house. The skeleton businesslike replies that he was really just trying to survive. The girl lovingly hugs his arm and lounges around, and Gu Xiaobai points out to her how ugly she is. Sword replies in his own manner. If that can be called ugly, then what about Song Chuxuan? The skeleton pretends to say hello to his mistress. The sword is a little too much for him, but he didn't say anything, and he doesn't even have to let it show. Gu is just joking around and nothing more. He laughs at Sword for being able to catch him. The Sword replies that the skeleton has gotten bolder, or was it just his imagination? Xiaobai notices the dude sitting at the back of the table and asks who he is. And why did the sword bring him here? Sword replies that it's actually the same cat that Xiaobai was after. Isn't that unexpected? He sits up nicely and smiles at them. The guy has his cat paw up and is waving it around. Gu Xiaobai thought to himself, how is this possible? A cat and a sword. Did an alliance really happen? Skeleton presents this romantic scene in which a sword guy courts a shy cat. It makes him feel sick and want to burp. The cat is friendly, telling them all to calm down, and now he's ready to explain everything. Skeleton doesn't really want to get into this. He already knows who is to blame. Sword objects to him. Why is he acting like this? Protagonist. The cat is uncomfortable interfering, but he still has to interrupt them. Skeleton and the sword continue to stir things up. That fat cat has been causing trouble for everyone, and now Chung really wants to destroy it. They're both pissed off and decide to band together against their greatest enemy. The cat really humbly wants to interrupt this situation. He has something to say to all of this. The cat tells us that it all started with a small and cute kitty he holds in his arms. She looks adorable, like she came to them straight out of a fairy tale. Gu and Chung get even angrier about this. They begin to suspect the cat of sex trafficking in animals, but the cat composure asks them all to calm down, not to interrupt, and to listen to the end. Let them take a closer look. It's a newborn spirit cat. A cat of this kind has the ability to summon the souls of the dead. She's really unusual. And once, the spirit cat was even able to reach the 6th rank and summoned a horde of the dead to ravage the land. The Chung family realized all this, and so they tried to get rid of such a cat, since it was beyond their control. Cat points to the ghost girl and says that she is only a created error in the Chung family's experiment. The skeleton is perplexed. Created? But how is that possible? The cat smirks. It really is exactly like this. This Chung family sacrificed many lives to train their spirits. Under the feeling of power, people can do unthinkable things. Ghost girl can't believe what she's just heard. Who is she really then? And what's going to happen next? The skeleton smiles and reassures her. The girl may not worry. No one will hurt her. She obediently agrees in his embrace. The sword picks it up. Skeleton is showing off a lot. No need to do that. The cat is being ironic as well. He remembers Gu saying that he was afraid of her himself. Gu Xiaobai finds something to object to all of this. However, he would like to change races. It must be fun to be free to change your look, especially since he has a living example of a cat in front of him. If Gu could turn into a human, there would be less trouble from him. The cat offers to help him with that, but the sword discourages such an endeavor. It's too complicated magic for a mere skeleton. But the cat wasn't actually doing a transformation, just a disguise. And it wouldn't take much mana to do that. He came up with this method for himself. The cat makes a loud noise. Does Gu Xiaobai want to be trained in this? The skeleton kneels down and humbly asks the master to help him with this. The sword is surprised. How could he be their sworn enemy? Master Cat explains to his skeleton apprentice that he must first learn the skill of scanning a target. He shows it on the board. The skeleton sits diligently at a desk in the room and carefully takes notes. And the astonished ghost girl sits next to him. And after that, he can use reincarnation magic, like Sun Chushuang the Enchantress. The skeleton and the ghost sit next to each other and are immensely happy about this life lesson. But the cat warns against masquerading as someone very strong or he will die instantly. Gu Xiaobai is encouraged. Now he really understood everything. Chung Fengjian is perplexed. The skeleton seriously thinks so. The cat jumps down and stands beside him. Now he's going to hand Xiaobai some mana. He needs to kneel down. Skeleton interjects. The cat turns its butt in front of his face and spreads fluff. A bright pink cloud appears in front of the skeleton. He actively starts spinning left and right in front of him, spraying more and more mana. It hits the skeleton right in the eye. Gu Xiaobai becomes hypnotized, and now the cat licks itself, looks at the mercenary intently, and offers to learn this new skill. The skeleton is actually encouraged. He feels stronger and offers to fight the cat. Sword Fengjian wants to stop him. He asks what place was this skeleton thinking. The ghost sits in the back and watches them in confusion. Either way, the sword advises trying out this new ability. The ghost girl becomes all excited and holds her fists for the skeleton. But he firmly refuses, because he doesn't want to die instantly. Sword suggests that Gu turn into Song Chushuan for now, since she's at school now anyway, and besides her, they only have one other person left. Ghost sits frustrated away from them. Suddenly the mech is taken aback, he swears. The knight asks what's the matter. Why did the sword start to shake like that? They just forgot about Xiao Xiao. They both turn deathly pale and stand for a second at a complete loss. What should they do now? Gu Xiaobai opened his mouth wide and looks up. How could he have made such an oversight? Later, Chu Shuang runs down the street and tries to catch up with Xiao Xiao. She shouts after him that it would be better to stop. If it wasn't for her reputation, she would have sold it by now. The enchantress curses at the dog and calls him a dumb hat. What the hell is he thinking? The dog keeps running forward through the city and has no intention of stopping in his tracks. The girl runs behind him. The devil dog is feeling great. He's walking. It's very good for him. Suddenly, he's looking around. Maybe he should stop now. Has he forgotten someone? He breaks sharply with his paws with sharp claws on the ground. A lot of dust flies from behind. Song Chushuan was still running behind him and trying to catch up with him as soon as possible. The dog stops in front of the house and starts barking. The end of his tail is on fire. Chushuang finally takes a break after such an intense and prolonged chase. She is glad that Xiao Xiao stopped and chuckles. There's a sign attached to the house in front of them. It is Nanyang Street, Block 4, Building 8. She recalls that it was to the house of this address that the headmaster of her school kindly handed over the key. She matches her teacher Lee's request to chase the ghost away from this very house. She looks at the place and the sorceress gets uneasy. Things look pretty bleak around here. She's sick of the whole thing. Song Kuan doesn't like the atmosphere here at all. She's thinking, so Sun is afraid of ghosts? I guess so. But by comparison, she's more afraid of being penniless. Suddenly, a great idea occurs to her. Since it was just a ghost, Gu Xiaobai must be able to handle it. Jushuan cheerfully calls for the little one to go back home to call everyone else. The formidable dog seems delighted and not afraid of anything. He seems to understand a lot of things. Why does it look like the dog is inviting the sorceress inside? Song Chushuan decides to go in after all, because who doesn't work doesn't eat. She inserts the key into the lock and opens the door. The inside of this house is just as gloomy and dark, and the atmosphere is unsettling. The young girl carefully steps inside and looks around. She apologizes for the intrusion. Chushuan can't contain her fear. She begs Xiao Xiao to take her where she needs to go. The devil dog clutches her tightly behind him. The enchantress is very scared to be here. She would like to go back to her home now. The girl just wants to fall asleep in her bed after she kills that dog. Someone in the darkness begins to chuckle ominously. You can smell fresh blood and fangs all around. The girl screams with all her might. She becomes even more frightened and presses herself close to the dog. It's that fucking spirit somewhere around here. Xiao Xiao, let him help her. Sun doesn't know what to do anymore. But the dog also starts to get scared and howl. He covers his head with his paws and cries. Chushuang shouts that this is not the time for this. The enchantress repents in fear that greed is the root of all evils. She shouts for Gu Xiaobai to come to their aid. Suddenly she hears someone say they can hear her screams a mile away. She wonders if she's going to be rescued. This is Gu Xiaobai. He is on his way, and hurries to come to his mistress's rescue as soon as possible. Gu Xiaobai rumbles into the house with a thunderous roar, swinging the door open sharply. He asks if his sorceress is all right. Song Chushuan is completely dejected. She is all in tears, hugging the devil dog in hopes of getting some protection. She sobs loudly with her mouth wide open. Xiao Xiao is also frightened and sits crying idly. Song runs straight to Gu with his arms outstretched. Finally, he has come, and this dog is just awful. But Xiaobai steps aside abruptly so that Sun misses and falls to the floor with a clatter. The skeleton apologizes to the dog. He must have been very frightened. The disheveled girl puts her hand on the skeleton's skull and squeezes it hard. She shouts his name loudly. Xiaobai doesn't understand why she is so furious. Sword smirks at the sight of it all. Let him be thankful she didn't eat him alive. Skeleton can smell the stench of death in here, and they need to get out of here fast. Someone sneaks up on them, a hand with sharp claws barely visible but intimidating. The creature smells hellhound, human, and undead. A couple of friends turn around in horror. They can't understand who is saying all this. A fierce ghost girl with red eyes and an arm outstretched towards them flies in front of them. She seems to recognize someone. The infuriated ghost blames the skeleton and says it was all due to his mistake. Gu sees the ghost in front of him again. Is it another creation of the Chung family? Young Chushuan stands behind her, all white with fear. He figures he doesn't have the strength to deal with her at the moment, and those two won't come to their aid. He recalls that as he was leaving, the cat held up Ghost Gu's mistress and said they would wait for him at home. In that case, they should resort to one of their most legendary skills. It's to escape as quickly as possible. But the girl abruptly grabs him by the scruff of the neck with her hand and yells for him to stop now. It's overflowing with justice. They can't just stop halfway through. Feng Jian says that a cup of soup may well be worth that justice, and the skeleton implies that greed rather than justice is behind it. Chushuan hears them. Do they want to die from her rage? The strong and embittered ghost was already tired of watching the whole pointless argument. She orders them all to shut up immediately. The ghost abruptly disappears, leaving behind only a lot of purple mist, making it hard to see everything around. She's the one purposely using the faint fog to hallucinate to confuse them. Sun is glad to hear something useful now, but how to dispel it to them now? Chung Fengjian is at a complete loss. He is a simple sword after all. What can he do in response to all of this? Song Chushuan grabs him and begins to scrape his blade against the floor. Chung bends over and screams in terrible pain. He really doesn't know how to dispel this fog, but there are other ways. He offers the skeleton to chop the fog with it. Xiaobai does it diligently. They seem to be succeeding. The ghost comes to a bewilderment. She didn't expect these two to be able to pull it off. The ghost can't believe it. Gu Xiaobai succeeds in dispelling the fog. Now the sorceress has to catch this ghost in time. Chu Shuang decides to use the holy flame to catch her. Her wand lights up brightly and sizzles. The ghost tries to somehow cover herself with her hand so she won't be caught off guard by those flames. But the flames disappear, and the twig begins to simply burn in the young sorceress's hand. The skeleton sees all of this. He freezes for a moment. The mistress becomes extremely furious. How could this have happened to her staff? She yells loudly. The skeleton and the sword stand watching as if dead. Was that supposed to work? Then what's next? Sword Fengjian comes up with the idea of not sweating about it and just throwing that stick at the ghost. Sun throws his burnt staff as hard as he can at their opponent. Maybe that'll crush her. But the ghost only smirks back. Is this staff for her? It's just a match. What will it do to her? The sword just drops to the floor like it's dead. Now the ghost puts her hand on the skeleton's head and says she intends to eat it. Gu Xiaobai's head lifts up and a soul in the form of bright blue clouds emerges from it. The ghost encourages the undead to open their souls to her. Ghost will definitely be able to use it properly. Song Chushuan can't believe it. She calls out to him so that Gu Xiaobai will somehow hold on. The villain lifts the skeleton high with him. He admits that he didn't have a chance from the start. It's over. Skeleton just wants to have time to say he had a good life. Sun just stands sadly behind him and watches. The skeleton is saying goodbye to the world. He has no clothes. He's flying like he's in space. It's his time to go. Suddenly, a beloved ghost flies up at great speed to the aid of his skeleton. The ghost screams to let him go immediately. She reaches out her hand and tries to influence the enemy ghost with her power. The ghost is surprised. Xiaobai's mistress defends her skeleton and screams that if this villainess doesn't let him go, she'll kill her in a second. The evil ghost keeps smiling and holding Gu's head. How dare another ghost steal her food? The skeleton's favorite gathers all its power. A bright light pink glow forms around her. She flies high and screams shrilly. Her opponent is just as strong. She closes with her hand and does not let go of her prey. Song Chushuan stunnedly watches this fight with her mouth wide open. After all, Gu Xiaobai belongs to her. She looks up mesmerized, and the whole thing begins to glow as well. Chushuan presents the bright halo of her skeleton head above her. The glowing sorceress runs towards them as if out of breath. Her hiding place has been discovered. She needs to do something. Fengjian shouts to the ghost that the girl has applied the fire of friendship. A lover bites another ghost fiercely on the arm. Something is happening between them. Gu Xiaobai feels like he's falling headfirst into a deep abyss. It's like some kind of abyss. He lands with his back on the floor unconscious. The evil ghost had let him go after all. A bright and powerful glow appears, like the fire of the soul. It's some kind of magic. What could it be? That light is blinding both ghosts. They cover their faces as best they can. Sword Cheng Fengjian sees the transformation and shouts to Miss Ghost Savior to run away. The bright magical flames and purple light completely encompasses the evil ghost. He's crushing her. The ghost can't believe it. She can't survive that kind of power. The ghost is very grieving, losing to some skeleton, something she never thought possible. A stream of dim purple light appears in the background at the sight of this ghost and goes downward. It's a bright piece of the soul of a defeated horrible ghost. But what will become of it now? A soul particle goes straight into Gu Xiaobai's skeleton. He comes to his senses and doesn't realize, is he still alive? Gu Xiaobai is now soaring to his full height. This is an interesting and unusual event. He begins to glow brightly with a light blue color. This has never happened before. He notices that it's as if his bones are now renewed. The skeleton's mind also seems to have cleared after the incident. The improved clarity won't hurt him. He lies in the house in bed and opens his eyes. What is it? Is there someone's saliva on his head? It's a satisfied Xiao Xiao playing with him. He awakens and rises from the bed, and with his hand he pulls aside the huge tongue of the devil dog. He sees Song Chushuan sitting beside him. She is dozing beside him. There is also Fengjian next to him. The enchantress opens her eyes and notices that he is finally awake. But what does it all mean? Gu Xiaobai had been sleeping in his mistress's bed all this time? What was he even doing here? Chushuan replies that she just wanted her surviving friend to get some rest after the altercation that happened. That's when Cheng Fengjian's sword once again reveals secrets. He says that Sun is faking it. She has been watching her skeleton all night. The girl sharply thrusts that overly talkative sword into the fireplace under heavy flames. He tries to turn away to stop it. After all, he's just a sword. Xiao Xiao's dog is still contentedly thinking about eating a skeleton head dinner with hot sauce. Gu is surprised. He slept for a very long time. What happened yesterday? He's examining himself. The skeleton has a very different feeling. Sword Cheng hurriedly congratulated him on his rank increase. He is now a higher grade mercenary. Enchantress Sun was in amazement for her friend. After all that, he was able to raise his rank? Sword explains. It's all because the skeleton absorbed the soul of that defeated ghost. He's now a rank 9 skeleton. Chu Shuang doesn't forget to correct the boys. That's good, but Gu is still a skeleton, not a headless horseman. Feng Zhan spurred Song on. Let her be sincere for her friend. She must just be jealous that he's increasing his rank faster than her. In response, she shoves the sword into the hot stove again with fury. Chung begs her to stop or it will break. The sword remains lying behind them. He says sadly that he is now impotent. Song Chu Xuan is seething with anger. She orders Gu Xiaobai to get out of bed immediately. But the skeleton refuses. He prefers to rest in this comfortable crib some more. His head still hasn't stopped hurting. Mistress smirks at him. He had just raised his rank. Where did all his vigor go? Someday this wizard will be the best therapeutic massage therapist in the world. The skeletal bones feel like they're falling apart. You don't have to let her do that now. The hot sword flies straight at him. The skeleton jumps up and yells for Feng Jian not to burn his butt. Xiaobai begins to remember what happened as he collects his bones. He seems to have heard 2 ghosts before passing out. He was able to absorb one. But where did the other one go? He wants to find out. Did she stay with them in the house? Chung Fengjian replies. Does the skeleton really want to know this? Gu is ready. He wants to hear the whole truth about what happened. After all, it's his beloved. There's a serious conversation between them. Sword admits that his girlfriend is not with them right now. The ghost has been kidnapped by this cunning cat. He wants to kidnap the skeleton too and make it his slave later. Gu knew something terrible was going to happen. He is desperate. He had managed to raise his rank to level 9, but it was no match for the power of a ghost. He's going to risk his life again. Not a quiet day, even after all these victories. But this is no time to panic. Skeleton will try to work things out. What he needs to do now is talk to the fat cat. The next day, the cordial cat asks if Gu Xiaobai is going to get married. The mercenary refuses. Stop messing around with him. They still have things to do. A ghost appears from the back of a cat. Will her lover drive her away again? She calls him a liar several times. She begins to erupt with indignation and pounces on Gu. The skeleton begs to stop bullying him. The cat chuckles at this scene. He can't seem to control this ghost. He grabs her from behind by her dress with his claws and tells her to calm down now. What kind of a hot-tempered woman is that? He explains to her that she is the most powerful ghost in this town, and the cat just can't let the skeleton control her. He will unfortunately not be able to let her go until the girl learns to think for herself. Skeleton is of course angry about this. Xiaobai calls him overly selfish. The cat only chuckles in response and jokes that he will now find him the spirit of a cat so he can rest. The cat gets between them and says that now they can say goodbye to each other. The girl stands as if mesmerized. She would like to choose the right words for her beloved. I think she's onto something. The girl mysteriously asks Gu Xiaobai to wait for her. She is very sweet and sincere always with him. The skeleton only smiles. What can he say to her? Of course he's willing to wait for her. Even though he is laughing, he is also trembling all over. Chung's sword at his side reminds him to keep his cool. The enchanting ghost freezes for a moment. She bites her lip. What is she going to do? She hugs Gu Xiaobai tightly, who is just left standing there with his mouth open. It's a charming union. The girl opens her mouth and a small glowing cloud comes out. Skeleton is getting a little wary and tries to turn away. He has a feeling she wants to eat his soul with such a tight embrace. She's quite close and looking directly into his eyes, sweetly opening her mouth and sticking her tongue out. There's a strong magical light around them. She pulls back and covers her mouth afterward. Now they will never forget each other. Sword Fengjian explains to the skeleton that this beauty has just shared a piece of her soul with him. How delightful. Gu is grieving and cursing. So now he's a cursed undead. But the sword convinces him that the skeleton is no longer undead. The happy cat interrupts them and says he's had enough work for today. It's time to go. Sword reprimands the cat after him. Does he want to just pick up and leave? The emboldened and cool skeleton reminds him that the guild has business with the cat. Meanwhile, in the misty village of the Mercenary Guild, there is a conversation between 2 people at a table. The man turns to the female worker, Lin Lin. He is the president of the Shangguan Shaolei Mercenary Guild and wants to clarify something with his employee right now. The acting president asks why she made Gu Xiaobai a mercenary. He reprimands her. If this happens again, he will fire that clerk Lin Lin. But this is some kind of misunderstanding. The clerk of the Mercenary Guild was certain that this man was from a wealthy family, so their refusal would have a negative impact on their reputation. The president is getting furious. Did he tell her that himself? The clerk excuses himself for acting like a real tuna beer, and only very rich people can afford it. Shangguan Shaolei turns around and seems to see someone. Isn't that the same Gu Xiaobai? Speak of the devil. The guild clerk confirms it's really him. What a happy coincidence. He brings the very same cat in his hand and completes the quests. The clerk, on behalf of their guild, congratulates the mercenary on gaining the rank of white and issues him a new license. President Shangguan is slightly puzzled. This person looks a little sad for someone who managed to complete 10 missions at once and rise so quickly. It seems the president was able to guess. Something terrible must have happened to him in the past. Just like with himself when his mother forcibly took his breast away from him when he was a baby. Clerk Lin Lin is dumbfounded. He must be the young master from the Chung family who was killed recently. This time the president will leave everything as it is, but from now on such mistakes will not be repeated. The employee sighs with relief. The skeleton regretfully estimates that it takes 10 experiences to go from black metal to white jade, and to get from white jade to gold jade takes 3,000. A real bore. How long is he going to save up those 3,000 by completing tasks for one experience? An experienced and ancient sword encourages a downcast young mercenary. He should not despair, for hard work is what counts. Skeleton is up and ready to go into battle again. They don't have much time before this cat comes out. Maybe for now it's worth defeating another magic general in the meantime. Sword sees Xiaobai's eagerness to gain experience. The mercenary turns around and hears a cry for help somewhere outside. There's someone being attacked. They are skeletons from the cemetery. A wounded man covered in blood has barely managed to get there. He's down on one knee and holding onto the door. There's a whole army of them, and they're coming to attack the city. It's a sunny, beautiful day. The main city tower is ringing loudly for all citizens. The president of the Mercenary Guild says that he received an urgent order from General Du. The mercenaries have been asked to come forward right now to defend the entire city. Things are heating up. One of the mercenaries laughs and is surprised. Why would the weak skeletons suddenly decide to attack their city? The new 9th-ranked mercenary Gu Xiaobai is standing aside. He asks, "What does Feng Jian think about this?" "It is fine, but there is one nuance first. There's a traitor among them, and it's the disguised skeleton Xiaobai. We mustn't forget that." The mercenary becomes furious. "How so? Maybe this sword wants to be a kitchen knife?" Chung asks him to stop. Gu admits that he himself has lived in the cemetery for a long time, and therefore knows everyone by sight. That's a plus. They didn't have much trouble and turmoil there, really. Life in the cemetery was quite pleasant. They had no reason to attack the city. It's very strange. Chung Fengjian's sword comes to a conclusion. If this is indeed the case, then someone must be controlling them. The sword is right here. Now they need to find out who's behind all this, and why he's orchestrating all this. The skeleton must be careful in this operation to avoid falling into the hands of enemies. The president shows all 5 fingers on his hand. That's how many skeletons you need to kill to get 1 experience point in their rank. He repeats so everyone can hear. For every 5 skeletons, mercenaries will receive 1 experience point. The guys are excited. That's not a bad score. Just 5 of some weak skeletons can earn 1 point each. It's a great chance to get pumped up. The mercenaries are excited. They are now going to get to the wall before anyone else. Xiaobai runs as fast as he can away from them. Sword reminds us that this is a pretty good deal. Will they be a part of it too? The skeleton represents a possible future development in all of this. This is a city of men, and he is one among them. It's too dangerous. If his robe is torn during the battle, he can be surrounded and killed along with the other skeletons. But the smart sword reminds Xiaobai. Has he forgotten what he learned from the fat cat? A skeleton with a bowl of soup in his hands remembers. Really, he can disguise himself, can't he? He starts accelerating full speed with great joy. All the points will be his now. Later at Song Chushuan's house. What does the skeleton want from her? She guesses his plan. Belle sits in the chair slightly perplexed. This is indeed an unusual request. Gu Xiaobai wants to disguise himself as her to kill skeletons for extra experience points. Cunning Xiaobai along with the ancient sword nods approvingly. This seems like a great opportunity. The sorceress isn't exactly happy about it. They originally chose to hide everything from her, and now a skeleton wants to become her. Skeleton prods the girl and points his fingers at her. After raising the rank, he realized how weak Sun is, so he can only rely on her. The sorceress grabbed her sword in anger. How dare he say that to her, his mistress? She's all furious. Her eyes are glowing with red light. Chu Shuang intends to slay the skeleton with her sword now, but Chung Fengjian hurries to stop her. The girl must calm down, for they have planned all this for her. After all, if the skeleton turns into her and helps her, then she can get a vacation. She stops and ponders. It seems like this would be a good thing for her if it worked out at all. Song Chushuan proudly replies that she will let Gu Xiaobai do it once. The mercenary chuckles. How quickly she changed her mind. But he also gets a bad feeling. She could probably send him away to study instead of her. He smiles and contemplates what he should do then. But that's what he has to do anyway. Sword and Chushuan are eating watermelon. They're ready. Let Xiaobai disguise himself as her, and Fengjian drives him over. Gu gathers all his mana to perform transformation magic. A bright light appears around. He puts one hand out in front and looks at his mistress intently to make sure everything is exactly right. Suddenly there is a loud explosion. Instead of a skeleton in only his clothes, a beautiful shy sorceress appears. She walks forward. It seems to have worked out. They are now indistinguishable at a glance. The real Chu Xuan is delighted. She likes this kind of magic. The skeleton looks just like her. Sword can't just stand by and not make a joke about her flat chest. Chu Xuan wonders how the skeleton feels in her skin now. The sword is in Xiao Xiao's mouth, who sees it all too. He says it smells awful. New Chu Xuan looks around herself and stares at her gloved hands in amazement. Everything seems to be fine. The sorceress is thrilled. Even her voice sounds exactly like her, so it'll be easy to fool the teacher. The skeleton has visions. If he has her body, then he can see it exactly in all parts. It was a good thing the clothes remained on the mercenary after the transformation. Otherwise, it would have come out awkward. Gu Xiaobai is touching himself. Wait, what is this? Some previously unfamiliar sensations appeared in his body. Looks like an Adam's apple. Song Chuxuan looks at the new self with surprise. There's a lot of nuance here, well, and magic. She opened her mouth in bewilderment. Is this kind of intimacy appropriate? Suddenly, the transformed Gu Xiaobai touches his chest and is surprised. He can't miss such a thing. There's a look of annoyance on his face. He says that he seems to have male breasts instead of female breasts. It must be the chromosomes. Suddenly, he decides to look down as well. That's something you can't ignore. He lifts his pants and looks at what's underneath. He's surprised. Even he has this. Song Chuxuan is completely stunned. She's frozen and can't move, and there is a big blush on her face. Cheng Fengjian interjected. What exactly does Gu Xiaobai have? He's curious about it too. He smiles heartily and looks up innocently. The skeleton replies that he now has the Tower of Babel. He turns to Song Chuxuan. She has one too, right? The sorceress skewered. He smashes the skeleton to pieces so that the bones are left just lying on the floor and runs out of the house. Gu is upset. Couldn't they have discussed this in a mature way? He removes the glove from his hand. Anyway, now no one can guess he's a skeleton. Wise Sword Fengjian pondered on the matter. Such things should be handled with caution. He thinks through that Xiaobai might be forcefully grabbed by some mercenaries, although he will claim that he is not a boy. But they will capture him not with a denunciation, but with a different intention. Chung thinks they'll need to worry about this sort of thing sometime in the future. There are mercenaries standing at the top of the fortress. They begin their defense and fire many arrows. The skeletons are not few, and they are evil. They're pretty well equipped and coordinated. They are good at fending off arrows. The skeleton swings a huge cleaver at one of the mercenaries. Oh, the army is dangerous. Other skeletons are also attacking with serious weapons. The mercenaries have so far failed to repel them. General Duming is watching the battle closely. The skeletons are organized, well-dressed, and fighting well. In addition, they chose the very city where the main mercenary guild is located. This whole thing is really weird. It's something to think about. Who could be behind this? The main gate of the mercenary tower opens loudly, within which a bright light burns. The guild's best enthusiastic mercenaries come running out. Too many coincidences. You can't just let experience go to waste. The muscular mercenary with a bare torso applies his signature flying press technique and shatters the skeleton to pieces. The other mercenary performs the lightest attack, which actually turns out to be super powerful. The next warrior successfully fights using the Dragon Gate. Now they are able to win. Each mercenary pronounces some sort of distinctive name. To the disguised Xiaobai, they sound familiar. I wonder what they are doing while doing this. He's collecting skulls. The padded skeletons begin to retreat. The perseverance and skill of the mercenaries are too great for the battle to continue. All the remaining skeletons gather into one crowd and run back to their graveyard. All the people let out cheers and raise their hands in the air. They have succeeded in defending their hometown. Their enemies have retreated. They were able to teach the skeletons a lesson, and now they won't touch the city. The mercenary guild raises up their red flag of victory. They stand on the bones of the skeletons they defeated. They decide to continue the revolution and catch up with the remaining enemies in the graveyard. Sword Fengjian gets a bad feeling about all this. He suggests not going on the offensive with these people. But Gu Xiaobai is sipping contentedly. What's there to stop them from being famous? After all, this robe won't pay for itself. Suddenly from the back, a girl puts her hand on his shoulder. Is she calling out to this young man? He turns around and sees in front of him a beautiful and strong girl with burning eyes. She introduces herself. Her name is Wei Chengxiu. What's his name? I've never seen a girl like her in the neighborhood before. He also introduces himself in a friendly manner. His name is Gu Xiaobai. Do you need any help from him? Wei notices that Xiaobai has a rather skinny body. The girl suggests that he might not be able to cope in the cemetery. Wei Chengxiu pulls out his huge golden sword and says, better look at it. She could be a good ally for this mercenary if Xiaobai was okay with it. Gao is all creased up and trembling. Apparently he's afraid that such a strong warrior can't expose him. The sword notices it. This is the first danger that has appeared. He panics and runs away as fast as he can. Chung-Xiu keeps up with him and asks him to wait. Why doesn't he say anything? They reach the outer graveyard, home of the undead. It's really dark out there. There's darkness and rocks all around. There are skeletal bones and debris on the ground. One of the mercenaries says he doesn't see any more skeletons here, just bones crunching underfoot. There are so many that it's hard to walk. He suggests we collect the skulls and go back. Why waste any more time? The other mercenaries in the guild also agree. They just want the points. Why take the risk? Xiaobai picked up a large bag of bones. Behind him, Wei is still walking behind him as well. She wants to help him carry these heavy bones. He turns around unhappily and tells her to leave him alone before Gu cracks her properly. Suddenly he notices something and stops with his mouth open. Xiaobai tells her to stop. What's that between her legs? Wei Chengxiu looks questioningly. An angry skeleton crawled right over her and tried to bite her between the legs. The girl wakes up. She immediately screams loudly and shrilly, and her eyes glow with a bright red light. She pulls out her huge sword and kills the skeleton with it. Xiaobai sees her fury and strong body. He is surprised. Now Chengxiu is once again extremely humble and innocent looking at Xiaobai. This is just a skeleton to her. She swears that she's not cheating. But Gu was puzzled by the atmosphere that arose at this. Is she definitely from the Mercenary Guild? Not far from them. Another mercenary tries to crawl to the other mercenary. She covers herself. The skeletons want her for some reason. A new army of skeletons gradually emerges from the darkness. They are the ones at home now. The entire mercenary team stands in a single pile. They notice with horror that they are now surrounded and in a desperate situation. Xiaobai realizes that actually ordinary skeletons are too dumb for this kind of strategy. Who is controlling them then? Feng Jian warns his master of the danger behind him. It's getting creepy. He turns around and sees someone wanting to hit him with a big bone. It's another skeleton coming up from below, and it's holding Gu Xiaobai right by the leg. We need to act quickly and decisively. The warrior slashes the skeleton with his sword on the run and says that they have encountered friendly forces. Many evil skeletons are closing in on them. Their eyes are burning and they have no intention of retreating. You can see that all these skeletons are reinforced, and they have some pretty good weapons to fight with. The mercenaries try to hold back the onslaught and fight back with all their might. Why are there suddenly so many of them? Xiaobai's new companion informs him that things are heating up. She suggests that he leave quickly, but it was not to be. Gu Xiaobai abruptly grabs her hand and won't let her go. What's he up to? Chengxiu looks around in amazement. What is he doing? Running away isn't the best option. So if she trusts him, she should stay with him. She presses his hand firmly to her breast and promises to be with him. For a moment, she takes on the appearance of a bride. Gu is angry. If this continues, he will just leave her. The two of them are holding hands in a gloomy cemetery. Someone seems to be heading in their direction. They are two evil skeletons. They are huge in size and are fortified. Their eyes glow with a red light like zombies. They go straight for their bones and hold huge cleavers to conduct the fight. But after all, Xiao Bao himself knows who he really is. He would never think that he would decide to be killed by the same skeletons. The girl warrior steps forward and covers Xiao Bai. She tells him to leave everything to her and rest. She performs her trademark searing sunstroke with her huge sword. Her whole body is full of muscle. Gu is really impressed. It looks like a real boss attack. He's holding his fists. Wei deftly throws his sharp sword towards the skeletons and tells them to catch it. It's like a ranged attack. The sword goes straight at them, but it has a countdown detonator attached to the top. The skeletons stand frozen and just stare. They won't have time to orient themselves so quickly. The detonator's starting to beep. It's about to go off. There's a huge explosion that blows everything to smithereens. There's nothing left of the skeletons. Wei remains in a fighting stance. She is all radiant. You can see that Wei Chengxiu is truly a master of her craft. Her technique has worked. She tells the skeletons in a backhanded way that it's just science, which the skeletons are hardly familiar with in these parts. Meanwhile, Xiaobai recalls that he had seen something like this once before, and that time it ended without success. But okay, I guess I'll have to agree this time. The end justifies the means, no matter what does the job. Let him take his sword. They have to go. The Chengxiu girl is all in tears, because now her sword is broken and she is left without a weapon. Gu just falls to the ground at this. It turns out that their lives are now his responsibility alone. He didn't see this coming. Wei happily hugs Xiaobai and asks such a strong hero to protect his poor girl. The mercenary isn't quite comfortable with all of this. He is indeed strong enough to impale her with his remaining sword. The girl starts to run away and Xiaobai tries to catch her. One of the mercenaries in the distance notices them. He calls them idiots who run to the center of the cemetery. Things are very different in those places. There are no longer just some skeletons with cleavers and axes, but real huge monsters of high rank. These two have no idea of the power of the undead that dwell there. They don't know what they're doing. The mercenary girl stops him. Stop worrying about others. They have their own problems to solve. Many of the other mercenaries are dead and lie nearby among the many bones. Behind them are fierce skeletons with weapons in their hands. From the front, they are also advancing. The mercenaries seem to be trapped with no way out. Gu Xiaobai and Wei Chengxiu walk deep into the very center of the cemetery. The bones under their feet are starting to run out. How much farther do they have to go? The cloaked, hooded skeleton turns around and reports that they are almost there. A cliff appears in front of them, over which Xiaobai successfully jumps without thinking for a long time. Chengxiu is worried about him and tries to stop him somehow. She shouts loudly to him. The skeleton sits at the bottom of the ravine. He's familiar with the area, he's fine. But Wei jumps after him as if into nothing. She spectacularly falls right in front of him with a big thud. Looks like she's out of luck. She's taking a breath. But why all this concert? The mercenary doesn't understand because there's only less than 2 meters here. Wei Chengxiu lies broken, with abrasions on her face, as if her end has come. She doesn't move. She comes to her senses and rises. It was a perfect romantic moment in which a brave knight saves a beautiful princess. Except now is not the time to turn into a princess. There is smoke hovering above, and there is a gloomy area with large stone ledges, and the two friends sit side by side at the bottom with their heads raised. Why aren't the skeletons following them here? What is this trench? Xiaobai explains that this area is dangerous, so ordinary skeletons are not allowed to enter here. Chengxiu shakes and shrinks back in fear. But Gu cheerfully reassures her that there is no need to worry. After all, the monsters here are sleeping soundly now. They're sitting next to each other and talking. What a day today. It wasn't supposed to end like this. Wei admits that she's tired today. She would like to take a nap and regain her strength. She drools and rests her head on her mercenary friend's shoulder. She whispers something quietly to herself about some soft, warm balls, happy boys. Suddenly, she puts her hand right between Gu Xiaobai's legs and starts stroking there. He goes into complete shock. How is this possible? Gu is all white. It can't be like this. He immediately pulls out his Cheng Fengjian's sword and hits Chengxiu with it. Gu calls her a pervert. There is a green evil glow around. The sword whispers quietly to its master that something is wrong here. We must look closely. Cheng is observant. There hasn't been a single sound since they have been here. This is really weird. A transformed skeleton gets a bad feeling. There's a big rock in front of him and there's some kind of evil smell. I think there's a shadow there. Better find out. It's silence in front of the boss. That's the real reason. Gu Xiaobai is beginning to smell the strong odor of death. This is hardly a good thing. He peers into the darkness. Who could be lurking out there? They need to be extra careful. He discovers a true shaman above level 6. His eyes glow green. By the look of him, it is immediately clear that he is very strong and dangerous. The shaman is heading straight for them, walking on the bones of the skeletons. A shaman is a high-level undead species that can control the dead and also possesses powerful ice magic. The skeleton obediently walks to meet him, as if it had turned into another zombie. Xiao revealed the culprit. It was this shaman who attacked the city by controlling the skeletons. Fengjian is surprised. What kind of pose did his master get? Wei Chengxiu begs Xiaobai to save them. She is terrified to see such a high level of undead in front of her. The mercenary punches her sharply and angrily in the face. Tell her to open her eyes. This isn't some ordinary skeleton. What can he do? The shaman examines his domain and those who have appeared before him. It is a lone man and a cloaked skeleton that is not yet under his control. Gu Xiaobai notices that this time he was instantly able to be sussed out. This was what was expected of a shaman. The mercenary is sure he's just an old pervert. He just doesn't mind checking to see if the skeleton's hips are developing well. But the savvy Xiaobai notices that if the shaman was really controlling him, his hips would move on their own. Cheng notices the strangeness of it all. Wei Chengxiu admits that she can't believe it. Some monster was able to reveal her. It is also known as bones, precisely because a Chengxiu warrior is always as hard as a bone. Gu Xiao is afraid that it has nothing to do with her bones. It's unlikely to help them now. The shaman activates his ice magic to enslave them all. He smirks. To him, these characters are just weaklings. A chilling silence heads from the shaman straight for Wei. She has nowhere to retreat. Gu remembers and shoves her sharply. What is she doing? Why doesn't she dodge? Does she want to die? The skeleton's new friend just falls to the ground loudly in helplessness, only managing to put his hands forward. She lies unconscious. The mercenary apologizes, but it was necessary to do so to save her own life. Their opponent only smirks at it all. The skeleton sacrificed his friend to hide his identity. Therefore, the shaman now looks at him with more respect. But there's no way it can be true. Xiaobai denies it. Don't twist it in your own way. The mercenary wants to find out what this undead is really up to. He draws his sword. The shaman is surprised. In front of him was a skeleton that was able to raise its level quite well while still possessing such a strong soul. He uses his magic again, already in Xiaobai's direction. What other secrets does this skeleton hide? His opponent is trying to control this skeleton with his influence, but the mercenary tries to resist as best he can. His arms and legs seem to be surrounded by huge and powerful tentacles. The cunning shaman convinces the skeleton not to be afraid, for he will dedicate his entire body to it. He recalls the sensations. The undead caresses him in the same way his new acquaintance did. Last time he was possessed by a ghost, and now this shaman. He doesn't have the strength to resist any longer. The skeleton starts to become delusional and imagines a charming skeleton princess who takes him away on her horse. He only hopes to be run over by this princess on the stairs to heaven. He's lying there with his arms crossed over his chest. Suddenly, the shaman begins to feel something new. It's a power higher than level 6. Who could it be? He looks around in anger. Who else is present here? Who dares to disturb him on his own turf? Sweet Xiaobai hopes with great hope that it turns out to be his beautiful princess. In the midst of fire and turmoil, a strong warrior emerges, who is ready to fight back against this villain. It's General Dumin himself. He was finally able to find the person in charge to stop it all. Xiaobai snorted. Another man showed up. It's getting more and more awkward here. Some kind of sausage festival. The shaman continues to hold on to the mercenary he didn't have time to finish with, but has to distract himself with this warrior. He wonders what a level 5 man is doing in a place like this. There are getting to be too many guests here. But Duming didn't come here to talk, but to put an end to this as quickly as possible. He threatens to gut the villain now. The shaman is fully prepared. He uses the power of his staff and summons an ice star to deal with this brash general. He's also full of strength and determination. This general will be sorry he ever came to this place. But Duming remains still standing just as confidently, not swaying in the slightest. Is that all he can do to him? Hard ice appears around his feet, preventing the general from moving freely. But to the man then, Wei Chengxiu flies lightning fast. But what is she going to do? She kisses him sharply right on the lips, showing her deep devotion and appreciation. She becomes enchanted by love. What is the name of the prince who wakes her up with a kiss of true love? The general is standing there all bewildered. What did he just yell to him? Is that why the general is here? Suddenly, Wei starts looking around quickly. She wants to find her Xiao Baiyu and make sure he's okay. While they were distracted, the shaman managed to kidnap her friend. Now they'll have to catch up with them. General Duming is still as determined as ever. This time, he will not let their enemy escape. The general tries to catch up with the wizard who is pulling Xiaobai behind him. The shaman only smirks at how foolish this mercenary's efforts are to him. Let him try to catch up if he can. The shaman can't be thrown off course. Ancient sword Fengjian turns to the transformed skeleton. Now is the perfect time for his dumb luck to play its part again. Cheng remembers their shared history well. The plot always saves them at the last moment. So who will show up to save them this time? The sorcerer still pulls at the skeleton's hood somewhere dark. Xiaobai is a skeleton again. The sorcerer is surprised. It's not often you see a skeleton who can learn and properly use disguise. That's quite interesting. Suddenly, the wizard holds only his clothes in his hand. The skeleton seems to have vanished. How could he let it go so easily? The wizard curses and is greatly distressed. How did Xiao Bao manage to slip away right in front of his eyes? He stops to ponder how best to proceed. The sorcerer has figured out where the skeleton is, but this level 5 stalking moron won't let him find it. The shaman accelerates sharply away from the general, his legs spinning as if at the speed of light. Let him not dare to run away. The sorcerer will be back very soon. Duming can only follow him with his gaze. He's indignant. How dare that wizard act like he's already lost? They didn't even fight. Beneath them lie whole mountains of skeleton bones that crunch loudly underfoot. And the lurking goo watches from the sidelines as they run away. He's happy. Let him get the hell out of here. Let the skeleton come to his senses. The shaman is too strong for him. The skeleton boasts and says that after insulting Song Chushuan so much and raising his rank, he was able to learn a new ability. It's to pick himself up and run away. But the understanding Chung replies that it's more like cowardice and ingenuity than anything to do with his level of strength. A confident Gu asks the sword for permission to show him something and calls him a cute summer child. The sword is confused. What did this strange phrase mean? What was on Xiao Bao's mind again? He takes the bone and throws it far forward. The throw was really strong. Chung Fengjian is impressed. That's a lot of power. But that's not all. Now let the sword watch the bone return to him. What a great idea that is. Chung suggests tying it to one of his bones as well, and then it will become a flying sword. The skeleton frantically steps aside somewhere. The sword repeats, "Is Xiao Bai capable of doing such a thing?" Suddenly, Gu becomes very lethargic and discouraged. His bone has been stolen from him. He clutches his head. Now he smells the familiar breath and taste of soap. Where would that be from in this place? That's the happy dog Xiao Xiao running to meet him. It's been a long time since they've seen each other. Gu, along with the sword Chung Fengjian, immediately recognize it. The dog rushes at a great speed. They are radiant with happiness and happy to see each other again. How unexpected. Two friends together again. Xiaobai was lucky to dodge the collision. Xiao Xiao was rushing so fast that he wouldn't have had time to stop without hitting him. The skeleton greets the devil dog, but why doesn't he see Song Chushuan? Was she the one who sent him? This dog has only had one thing on his mind since they first met, and that's why he's always around. He still imagines a skeleton head in hot sauce. With that thought, he caressed Gu Xiaobai with his huge tongue sticking out. His friend reassures him. It's all just a lie, because there never was or is any spice in him. Plus it smells like tentacles. He enthusiastically mounts the dog in a conqueror's pose. Anyway, it's time for them to go home. No one can stop them now. The shaman understands everything now. This skeleton was not under his control because it was hiding in the city all the time. Let him run with or without a dog as much as he likes, but once the sorcerer gets rid of the interfering people, he can't escape. His goal is to make Gu Xiaobai his puppet, and the shaman has no intention of stopping. What's going on? Why does Xiaobai hear the shaman's voice? He puts his hands to his head in panic. Feng Zhan's lightning. Perhaps the enemy has tagged him and is now talking to him through telepathy. Even though the enemy is at a distance, he has a magic staff with which he can affect the skeleton with his enchantments. Using his tags, the shaman can track and talk to him wherever he is. What the hell is this? Gu doesn't want to play a game like Yandere Simulator, though he can't help but marvel at this great game for him. He collapses and begins to wriggle in agony, but the sword informs him that the skeleton is too weak to fight this magic. So he is left with only a way out to find the mark. Gu suggests what kind of bone this pervert might have chosen for his mark, but the sword lands it. It doesn't work like that. Cheng Fengjian is once again mentoring his friend. An alternative solution would be to get the mistgrass in the dungeon. It has the ability to dispel magic. Gu is pondering. He knows of a dungeon that is under the cemetery. They have no other choice. The skeleton cheers up and raises his sword high. They are all ready to go after the pot together. The shaman continues to walk through the graveyard, stepping on many skeletal bones. Everywhere a sound is heard from them. He curses. All those pesky little people are giving him a hard time. You have to be careful now. Just at that moment, General Du Ming catches up with the shaman. He appears in the form of a tiger. The villain stumbles and falls on his bones. Du Ming teases that he unfortunately doesn't have any candy for the bad little girls. He scrutinizes the shaman and notices that he is missing something. Where is this skeleton now? The sorcerer only chuckles contentedly in response. He had put a mark on Xiaobai, so he wouldn't get away from him in the end. The general intercedes. The skeleton is from his village, so he has a duty to protect it. The sorcerer smugly denies that Min is nothing to the skeleton. He only wants the shaman. In that case, the general draws his long sword to teach the insolent man a lesson. He makes a big whiff with his sword and jumps on the shaman, who is still lying on his bones. The shaman remains dangerous. He uses his purple magic to attack, and the turtle on his head emits a mist. The villain strikes a powerful blow at the general. The villain strikes the general with a powerful blow. The green-haired sorcerer doesn't understand. This attack should have killed Du. How can he still stand? The man dutifully agrees. After all, he has prepared far better than the villain could have expected. But in reality, Min quietly turns to the side and cries. That attack cost him a few defense cards, and they don't pay for themselves. The head of the mercenaries suggests that this skeleton must be halfway to the Misty Village by now. All it takes is a little more delay for the shaman. Meanwhile, somewhere in the center of the gloomy graveyard, something is happening. It's Gu Xiaobai and his faithful dog reaching deep inside. There are huge and sharp bones sticking out of the ground. Sword Fengjian remembers and calls out to his master to quickly look up. A determined Gu discovers that this is just the place they need. Above them fly many evil and fearsome gargoyles possessing the power of the 8th level. This was not a good meeting for the wanderers who had come. They entered the gargoyles' territory. Sword ponders what they can do to elude them. Xiaobai seems to have found a solution. There are many holes in the ground here made by underground monsters. They can try to hide in them. It was time for Xiao Xiao to shine. Master orders him to quickly dig these pits for them. Huge, contented dog, happy to serve. She loves this kind of work. She digs up the ground quickly and skillfully. Suddenly she discovers something. Is there really someone underground? The dog has disturbed someone in this place of the dreaded undead. The skeleton walks over to look at him to see why his dog has suddenly stopped digging. A huge and strong demon with horns and wings appears in front of them. He apologizes, but this is actually his bathroom. He spreads his wings and soars above them. It's a boss with strength above level 8. Digging holes in these lands was not the best idea after all. Who knows what will happen next? Cheng Fengjian is cursing at the master. Was this his brilliant plan? The dog lies down on the ground in horror, covering his eyes with his paws. At that very moment, the skeleton's head flies off. He laughs at such an oversight. All he did was forget to hold his head. A boss with an army of evil gargoyles is standing right in front of them in full force, and they all seem to be hungry. How reckless of them to come here. Don't they know what's going on at the border? Even Chung Fengjian is falling down and is all crooked. This time, they will really die. The evil boss doesn't seem to like to negotiate anything, especially on his own land. He laughs, but that's hardly a good thing. Chung figures to himself that if Gu dies, he'll be used as a toothpick for God knows how long. The headless skeleton is trying not to lose heart. He thinks about what they can do now. The skeleton seems to rise from the ashes. He glows in his own flawlessness, and above him, he proudly holds the indestructible Fengjian. He poses cleverly and introduces himself to everyone. His name is Gu Xiaobai. How can he help them? But you can't just buy the boss with a fake cry. What did that little bitch just say to him? He's ordering him to shut up. Xiaobai defiantly replies that he only sees a level 8 gargoyle in front of him, cowering at the feet of a level 6 headless horseman. The dog beside him whimpers quietly. He holds the ancient sword before him with dignity. The gargoyle is slightly perplexed. Who's that dog next to him? The boss calls the alien a brat. Gu responds with extreme displeasure. How dare he call this bloodthirsty wolf horse an ordinary dog? His rudeness simply knows no bounds. Xiaobai explains that he needs to get mistgrass for his date with the ice dragon. Now let them clear his path. The skeleton sits proudly on the dog, sword at the ready. This is all rather strange to the gargoyle leader. After all, he doesn't feel any power from this skeleton. He must be hiding his real level. But we shouldn't jump to conclusions. He recalls that sucking up to the powers that helped him succeed in life. So even if the chances are slim, he should be supported. He has a series of flashbacks going on in his head. When he's standing between two huge fighting monsters. When the left hero was victorious, the gargoyle would embrace him with complete sincerity of love. But when another monster won in the second round, the boss would resort to him. He always followed the winner, a simple strategy. He holds out his hand and orders his subordinates to stand aside. No one in his presence dares to lay a finger on him. He flies obediently in front of them over the piles of bones. A bloodthirsty, menacing wolf follows. And the headless Gu Xiaobai sits on horseback with a proud pose and looks around. Fengjian admits that he admires him, and a pack of gargoyles flying obediently behind them. It's just amazing. The sword is in thrall to its master. Meanwhile, Gu Xiaobai's head is angry and is in embarrassment, because it is right in the mouth of that drooling dog. Skeleton Gu Xiaobai looks at this whole situation and realizes that this has never happened before, and here it is again. A pack of gargoyles obediently flew right beside him as if they were some longtime friends. The mercenary lies down and says they'll just take the fog grass and then get the hell out of there. The gargoyle boss is beginning to suspect something. The headless horseman's horse is clearly a hellhound. He compares himself to him. The gargoyle's level is 8th highest, and the dog's level is 8th medium. He cordially shows the heart sign with his hands and says they are just made for each other. He begins to dream of a headless horseman riding him, and they both glow with happiness. The gargoyle boss turns to the dog, who starts sniffing him. What if he tried to become the headless horseman's horse himself? The undead walks up to the side of the dog and licks him. He's surprised. Tastes like human. Why is that? It's a very strange coincidence. The gargoyle yells loudly at them and wants to find out from Xiaobai why his horse tastes like a human. It was Song Chushuan who was stroking him and visibly encouraging him with food from the skeleton head to go to him on his sniff. The skeleton is cursing. The dog must have absorbed the smell of the city. It's not good for them in a place like this. A troop of gargoyles, along with their leader, become enraged. They turn around and want to find out what the meaning of this is. Suddenly, a powerful magic staff appears near them, from which a strong purple light spreads. A troop of gargoyles seems to have been able to take them by surprise. Some of them are a little afraid. The headless Xiaobai is still sitting on top of his dog Xiao Xiao. Must be an ambush from the humans. They came right here to protect the headless horseman. Magical purple flames spread all around. The dog and the skeleton huddle on the ground, trying to take cover. The magic of the humans affects all the undead. The gargoyles scream loudly and cannot resist. Boss is furious. How dare they destroy his minions with just one blow? He's not just gonna let it go. People know how to use energy, but he does too. He puts his hands forward and lets out a powerful blue magical flame called petrified light. But that flame goes right back to his head. His tongue is out, and the boss can't do anything in response. The men act quickly and efficiently. Nearby, huge rocks are also flying apart, just like that in the blink of an eye. The gargoyle boss has learned Zen. Now he's become a decapitated man himself. Fengjian is between the skeleton and Xiao Xiao. He informs them, something is coming, we need to lie down. The intelligent Xiaobai is quick to realize, if it's humans carrying out the attack, he'd better meet them as a human. He manages to quickly get his head back and transform back into Chushuan. Satisfied with himself, the warrior stands in front of a pile of dead gargoyles. He rejoices that he was finally able to defeat their boss. The other warrior girl also approaches and holds in her hand the magic staff from which the fatal blow was delivered. She calmly reminds him that she did all the work for her partner. The disguised mercenary gratefully thanks the brave heroes who saved him. He thought he was done for. The stink girl with the staff coldly replies to take him along to find out later what this skeleton wants. Xiao Bai scolded. Did this professional manage to figure him out so quickly? Or was it that she had seen him? Her partner says to calm down and not be so angry. It's better to just relax. The savior notices a badge on Xiao Bai's thigh. It means that she is a mercenary from Misty City. The man is friendly but persistent in his interest. He must be using 2 layers of disguise. The warrior has the ability to recognize his fellow humans from anywhere in the world. Gu turns to his new buddies. He wants to know what their names are. And who are they themselves? The man smiles and proudly replies that he is Shangguan Lei, nicknamed the Tiger of the East. And this strict woman with a staff is called Mujun Yun, and she's a shadow guardian herself. It's all very entertaining indeed for a young mercenary. He compares all the facts and comes to the obvious conclusion that this man is the father of the guild. Xiao Bai is shocked. This can't be true. Gu immediately assesses the situation. Shangguan Lei seems to be very kind to him. However, Mu Yunyun still has some suspicions. She walks right up to the cloaked mercenary and slightly startles him with her appearance. Xiao Bai becomes uneasy. He asks again if there's anything he can do to help. The insolent warrior suddenly takes Xiao Bai's clothes. She wants to see what's underneath. She has doubts and a feeling that it's a guy and not some girl. Xiao Bai is all embarrassed and steps back and takes away the clothes. But Mu Yunyun isn't done yet. She needs to see more to be sure. She senses a strong demonic pout from their new friend. But where is it coming from? Xiao Bai modestly replies. Now that they have asked so kindly, he will tell them the truth. It has been tagged with a tracking ability. And now to get rid of it, you have to get the fog grass. The warrior Shangguan Lei asks who did this, who tagged Xiao Bai and why. It was done by a powerful shaman who is behind the attack on the Mist Village. Then in this case they need to go back to protect the village. The man consults with his partner, but Mujun doesn't quite fit that. They had almost reached their goal after such a long journey. This is interesting. Gu Xiao wanted to know more about their purpose. Last month, they were tasked with finding blacksmithing materials and an artifact in a cemetery. This artifact is supposed to appear only with the arrival of the new moon. So if they come back, they will have to wait another month. But the only thing at stake here is money. An elated victor, Mujun Yun, stands amidst the fallen undead. He replies that a brave hero is not motivated by money alone. Mu Yun calls him a Chunibian, that is someone who has 8th grade syndrome. The strong warrior immediately sits on his knees. In that case, they have no time to waste. Yun jumps on his back and they move out into the road. Xiao Bai smirked. Is this man infatuated with his fiancée? He recalls a similar moment in a book he once read. Shangguan Lei turns around and interjects, asking if Xiao Bai wants to continue with them. The transformed skeleton smiles embarrassedly but has to refuse. He can't go anywhere without the misty grass. The girl asks if this mercenary is aware of where exactly she is to be found in this place. Honestly, I have no idea at all. Xiao Bai is at a loss. He's very sad. But suddenly, a scroll of some kind is thrown right into his hands. What is it? It's a card that should help him find the right weed. They wish him luck and quickly run away. The mercenary is left alone again with his faithful dog. Gu is a little embarrassed with gratitude. Cheng Fengjian says that it will still take some time. Now we need to scrutinize the map carefully. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the cemetery, a tense battle is taking place between the general and the shaman. The shaman attacks with all his strength. He emits bright magical blue rays. He uses his signature moves. Du Ming is trying to fight it off. He's not having an easy time here because he's not on his own territory. The general is thinking about Wei Chunxiu. In this time, he should have already returned to the city. He can't take the fight any further as Shaman has the advantage here. It will be best to retreat for now. Du stands on his bones with his huge sword at the ready. He is considering a plan of retreat. The sorcerer notices that his opponent now intends to leave, but it is too late. Min is wary. He's swearing. The general assumes something was wrong. What should he do now? It turns out, after this fight, that Du only lost his time, and the shaman won it on the contrary. Wei Chunxiu is still walking through the cemetery. She walks up the bones. She is depressed and shaking. This strong warrior would never have thought that a graveyard could be so treacherous. Suddenly, the wrestler lifts his head. His eyes shine again. He's remembering something, and it tells him not to give up. This is Song Chuxuan in his fairy tale dreams. She smiles and encourages him that his time has not yet come. He has regained his strength and is ready to get out of this gloomy place. Let him wait for him. He'll be home soon enough. Chengqiu carefully peeks out from behind the stone wall. We have to stay careful. What happened? It's lighting him up. Something terrible. The city is surrounded. There are many flames and all sorts of undead coming in. Meanwhile, an army of undead attacked the city while the mercenaries were sorting out the graveyard. A whole army of skeletons and many other undead are advancing. They are strong and well-armed. They're very angry. You can see from all the jets that they came here to conquer the city and no other way. Huge spiders shoot their corrosive webs at the towers. The undead have their own crowning tricks of war. One of the guys at the top of the tower notices a corrosive web right next to him. It's very dangerous. Something must be done about this quickly. He runs to the lieutenant and asks him to send him to the catapult immediately. The catapult in the tower fires a huge cobblestone. The people of the city can also fight back against all sorts of evil. The defenders open fire. They stand guard and watch for hits on the enemy army. The boulder falls right on top of the huge spider and crushes it. It chokes on its own web. There's a breach. A young girl named Song Chuxuan modestly peeks out from behind. She notices that the whole thing doesn't look good. The catapult destroys the spiders, but their corrosive web destroys the walls faster. They're going to lose. Song Chuxuan's magic is not yet strong enough to resist the undead in battle, but she can heal the wounded. The skeletons begin to attack the fortress with their arrows. Behind them is nothing but fire and darkness. The arrows go straight at the defenders, one in the knee, one in the ass. They scream loudly in pain and bleed. They need a doctor, and as soon as possible. Who will be there in time to help them in this hour of need? The magical Dr. Sun is ready to help. She hurries over with her first aid kit. The guy is writhing and moaning in pain. Apparently the treatment isn't so painless. Chuxuan resented all of this. It would be better if she went to fight other fighters. The guy is kneeling high with his backside up, with a large syringe sticking out of him. Suddenly someone's hand appears and begins to work magic around them. This is one of the strongest wizards in the city. A circular yellow energy emanates from him. It's just marvelous. All of these people's wounds are completely gone. Even the syringes are no longer needed. He encourages them not to stop and to keep fighting in the same spirit. Forward with renewed vigor. Many arrows from the undead continue to fly at the fortress. The spiders also shoot their corrosive web. The young city girls are watching the success of their idol Tang Minghao with great joy. They are aware that he has an 8th level bronze mercenary rank, which is fully justified in action. An angry Song Chuxuan yells they better watch their heads. There's no time for that at all right now. The mercenary tells the girls to stand aside, because war is for adults only. Sun looks at him with interest. She goes into total amazement and falls as if into her dreams. This soldier has so many wounds. Sun has to heal him. The forces of the Mist Village are weakening. They're down 1 point. There are casualties. The leader is ordering us to defend the walls. It's time for everyone to gather and hold the defense. Tang Minghao stood right on top of the fortress at full height. Enemy arrows are flying at him, but the warrior is aided by his strong energy shield. The cheerleaders are all excited about this performance. One begs for a kiss, another calls him the hottest man in the world. A third screams that he's leaking. For Chuxuan, seeing such behavior is simply disgusting and unacceptable. She picks her nose. There are a lot of poison arrows. They keep hitting the warrior's shield and gradually piercing it. The skeletons are also hit by arrows, but they don't care about that. They keep coming. Young, beautiful groupies perform dances of love and devotion to the city's finest warrior defenders. Chuxuan just doesn't have the energy to be angry at something like this anymore. Who would be able to cure such a thing? Meanwhile, the arrows all keep hitting the shield set up in the fortress. They're not stopping. At this rate, Tang Minhao will soon run out of mana. From behind, a strong warrior girl jumps out spectacularly with a shield. Bright rays of light are emanating around her. Tang recognizes her. It's his friend Xia Xiaoyu. He's giving her his seat. Let her do her thing. She is an experienced and well-equipped warrior. Xia Xiaoyu displayed his thick, sturdy shield in front of them, which was decorated with many colorful patterns. The arrows hitting it immediately broke. A group with matching bright pink shoes performs. They step loudly to the same rhythm. Who are all these guys? They are very cheerful and dressed in the same brightly colored clothes. The guys are holding sticks in their hands. Sun opened her mouth wide. Who are they? Another fan club from another warrior girl. They dance beautifully and joyfully while singing a chorus. In their background, a brightly colored firework shoots. They sing that Molly is the cutest with her shield, but the arrows hit them. That turns out to be their last line. How tragic. Xia Xiaoyu is terribly upset. It's a big blow to her in the city. It's very unfortunate. Sun to the side chuckles softly. A blush appears on her modest cheeks. Xia Xiaoyu and Tang Minghao start arguing. She asks him to shut up his female fans now. Minghao replies that her groupies are only making things worse. They're on different teams, but Xia Xiaoyu's fans are now fired up. The defender looks out of her shield towards the undead. The situation is quite sad. After all, Shangguan Lei and Mu Yunyun still haven't returned. Will they really be able to repel this attack? Tang Minghao looks on with hope and faith. Of course they can win. The main thing is to stick together and keep fighting. Song Chuxuan stands to the side, slightly confused. She is also worried about everything that is happening. She can only hope that her loyal friend Gu Xiaobai will be all right. Meanwhile, the reincarnated Gu Xiaobai climbs up the high and steep cliff with his dog. He is humming a song with enthusiasm. The sun is setting and he climbs up. He keeps singing to keep his spirits up. He thinks he's climbing to the top. I think he's seen something unusual. In front of the mercenary is a brightly glowing small plant against a starry sky. Smoke is developing around it. Feng Jian is excited. They found it after all. The same misty grass. They were finally able to find it. Xiaobai opens the map and checks it against the drawing. The reincarnated skeleton is a bit puzzled. Shouldn't misty grass have light blue stripes? Just like underpants. What a beautiful comparison. Chung reassures his friend. The grass is just a light blue. No one ever said anything about stripes. Xiao Xiao still continues to climb up the cliff. He is very large, so he is lagging behind. Feng Jian adds that there are also silver mist herbs, but they have to absorb much more energy. Xiaobai pondered for a moment. There doesn't seem to be much of any energy in this flower. He scrutinizes the flower carefully before approaching. It must have been here for a very long time and developed a mind of its own. However, that's not enough. Gu wants to pounce and pick this marvelous plant as quickly as possible. It looks really unusual. It's rare. Something has to be done. The skeleton swears at the sword. Let him go and check things out. Cheng doesn't understand. Why him? Xiaobai accelerates and hurls the ball hard right towards the flower. Let Chung Fengjian cut this grass. He quickly flies flat toward the grass and splits the wind with him. Fengjian is just around the corner. Just a little more and it'll work. This flower is priced quite harmlessly. What the hell? Chung crashes into the protective ice that had worked as a defense for the grass. Now he's stuck there. Another problem. Fengjian is frozen. Now he's screaming to save him. It hurts him to stay like this for so long. The skeleton thinks about what to do next. In the meantime, his faithful dog Xiao Xiao had already come up from behind. Damn, still this flower is not as simple as it might seem. There is a bone sticking out of Xiaobai's right hand without a glove. The transformed skeleton Gu Xiaobai tries to push himself off the ground to carefully get closer to the flower. He's trying not to get trapped in the ice defense himself. What can he do? But it's too narrow here. The skeleton tries but can't pull out his sword Chung Fengjian. Gu's right hand gripped the hilt of the sword. Could it be loosened somehow? The skeleton watches carefully and tries to pull it from all sides, but all seems to be to no avail. He's cursing loudly. This flower still won't give up. Where did such power come from? Gu calls the grass nasty and reaches down with his gloved left hand. What an uncomfortable place to be with him. He manages to pluck the flower, but with great effort, and the sword is still stuck. Xiaobai curses the flower. He angrily turns back to the hard ice with hope. But everything is unchanged. Why is it like this? Gu crouched down slightly in despair. Even though he was able to pull out that weed, the ice still wouldn't retreat. The sword urged him on. Let him hurry over there. Suddenly, the Xiao Xiao dog opens its mouth wide. A powerful fire starts to come out of it. The master is stunned. Where did the fire come from? How? After all, that's what they need right now. Gu is happy with his pet. It came in very handy again in his time of need. Xiao Xiao's devil dog seemed to have gotten really angry. He was literally covered in flames. Sword can't understand where did the dog's skill come from. It's very unexpected since Xiao Xiao is still one level away from learning fire attack. The skeleton is satisfied, as if correcting his glasses after successful experiments. This once again shows that Xiao Xiao is a truly extraordinary hellhound. Yay, the freeze is finally gone. They all seem to be saved now, and got what they came for. Xiaobai has a plant in his hand. He looks at it and turns. Did it do all this by itself? Gu calls this cold, unapproachable plant the little child of summer. Did he really think he had a chance to stand up to them? Skeleton summons his fire dog and snaps his fingers. Gu Xiaobai orders Jiao Xiao to finally sizzle that frozen flower. A powerful fire engulfs everything around the flower. He can do nothing in response. The finished flower is now in the palm of the transformed skeleton's hand. At last he could get rid of the tracking spell and move on with his life in peace. Now it's left for them and Xiao Xiao to simply return home, carefully choosing the way back. Well, that's not the case. The huge dog falls to the ground with his tongue out and his paws back. After all that, he's pretty tired. It's a lot of stress. He needs to get some rest. A satisfied Xiaobai sits down next to him. He understands everything and strokes his dog. They take a short break. Suddenly, a huge black moon with a violet glow appears in the middle of the starry sky, and in the background there are some architectural tall buildings. Gu Xiaobai looks at this whole scene in front of him with interest, lifting his head up. That's impossible. Why does the skeleton still feel the presence of cold energy? He gets worried and immediately swears at the sword. Let him look around. He has a weak heart. What should he do? The sword is dumbfounded. What is he saying? Gu doesn't have any heart at all. Good, then they'll do it together. He covers his eyes with his hand and lifts Chung up. The dog lies behind him in bewilderment. But what it is in front of him, how is that possible? It's a rare phenomenon. A full moon, under which stands an unknown and mysterious tower. What the hell is that? At the entrance is a huge door completely covered in skulls, and in the middle is some kind of glowing circle that looks like a symbol. A transformed skeleton stands in front of the entrance. Looks like new adventures won't be waiting again. This place is full of surprises. In front of Gu Xiaobai's eyes was a view of the New Moon Palace. Above it was something like a black hole. Gu Xiaobai wondered if this palace was what Shangguanlei was looking for. He looked at it with astonishment. Sword said that there was a very powerful demonic energy emanating from the palace. He was a bit scared and suggested not to rush in just yet. Gu Xiaobai was determined. He was going to go since they were already here. He took his sword with him and headed towards the palace. Sword wasn't very happy with this guy's decision. He thought it sounded like a death call. Besides, Xiao Xiao was still asleep. The dog sprawled on the ground and sniffling. Gu Xiaobai thought that the dog must be hot. It was probably cooler inside. He pulled Xiao Xiao by the leash. Sword thought the guy's behavior was very strange. He thought something was wrong here. Normally, Gu Xiaobai is usually very cautious and is often afraid to get in the way, however, not this time. Sword felt that he needed to bring Gu Xiaobai to his senses. At this time, the guy was walking down the hallway humming something to himself while carrying a tray. Suddenly, Gu Xiaobai noticed a scabbard that was hanging on the wall. The boy was very excited and thought it was a treasure. Gu Xiaobai told the swordsman that he could have them for himself and happily embedded his sword in them. The sword was not happy about this find. These scabbards were too tight. The sword was not comfortable in them. Gu Xiaobai walked down the corridors of the castle, looking around. Xiao Xiao followed him faithfully with his tail wagging. At some point, the boys heard strange sounds behind them. They turned around and saw the castle gates slamming shut with a rumble. Sword was very upset. He thought they had screwed up and sat depressed in the corner. Sword thought that perhaps they would stay here forever. At this time, Xiao Xiao tried his best to open the door and scraped it with his claws. Gu Xiaobai felt a sense of death. There was an incomprehensible energy hovering around. However, surprisingly, the guy was calmed by it. Gu Xiaobai was sure that someone was waiting for him. He shifted and headed towards the source of this strange energy. Gu Xiaobai was as if he was mesmerized by the magical power. He wasn't the least bit scared. In the middle of the castle, a skeleton sat on a huge throne made of skulls. He was wearing royal robes. This skeleton had a crown on its head, grinning maliciously and alarming in its appearance. At this moment, Gu Xiaobai felt a dark energy approaching him. The guy was very surprised and confused. He let go of his sword from his hands. It fell to the ground, the energy knocking Gu Xiaobai off his feet. In the courtyard, the entire sky was covered with clouds. It was already evening. The mountains loomed majestically above the ground. Gu Xiaobai found himself in some strange place. At first he didn't realize where he was. Then the skeleton looked around and realized that he was in a graveyard. The skeleton looked down at his hands. He was already in his usual guise. His disguise had fallen off. Gu Xiaobai saw his bathroom and his favorite book lying next to it. It was a place where he had spent a lot of time in the past. Gu Xiaobai was very excited. He threw off his scarf and jumped into the hot bath. Gu Xiaobai hadn't been home for a long time. The skeleton started reading his favorite book. The atmosphere was calm and familiar. At this moment, someone wrapped their arms around Gu Xiaobai's neck. A romantic mood appeared. It was the ghost girl. She was very happy that Gu Xiaobai had finally appeared in the graveyard. The girl was hugging and cuddling the skeleton. The ghost girl thought that now they could finally be together. She was in love with the skeleton. The girl wanted to become one with Gu Xiaobai. She slowly entered his bathroom and was going to fulfill all her desires. At this moment, suddenly someone grabbed Gu Xiaobai's leg. She shouted that she had gotten a skeleton. It was Song Chushuan. She was also in the skeleton bath and said that Gu Xiaobai would always be her headless horseman. The girl got up from the bathtub and pushed Gu Xiaobai in her chest. She was sure that he wouldn't be able to get away from her anywhere. The girls wanted Gu Xiaobai to make his choice. The ghost girl asked if the skeleton was shy. They were both very persistent. The girls approached the skeleton and blushed with embarrassment. They asked what Gu Xiaobai would do now. At this moment, something strange began to happen in the skeleton's chest. Two energies merged there. He didn't understand what was happening. The skeleton dissolved the girls with its energy. They didn't understand how Gu Xiaobai did it. Gu Xiaobai was strong in spirit. He knew that his soul would not answer them. Gu Xiaobai had his own reasons. Gu Xiaobai knew that both of these girls were fakes and were nothing more than a hologram created by someone. The skeleton sitting on the throne smiled slyly. He called Gu Xiaobai a friend and thought that he had done very well. Gu Xiaobai realized that this skeleton king was testing him. He looked at him suspiciously. The skeleton king replied that it was something like this, his eyes burning red. The atmosphere around him was intimidating. The skeleton still sat on the throne that towered over the area. A pile of skulls lay beneath his feet, and his eyes also glowed red. Gu Xiaobai wasn't afraid of him. He steadfastly stayed in front of him and waited for further action. The skeleton king welcomed Gu Xiaobai into his castle. He didn't seem to be hostile. Gu Xiaobai asked if the Skeleton King would let him go or not. He was very interested in this matter. The Skeleton King asked where he was so eager to get to. He began to use his powers. His finger lit up with light. In that same instant, Gu Xiaobai could no longer stand on his feet. He was chained to the ground by the strength of that skeleton. It had a terrifying aura. Gu Xiaobai tensed up. The skeleton looked belligerent. Gu Xiaobai looked at him in surprise. He didn't understand what he should do and how to get out of this situation. Gu Xiaobai, lying on the ground, said that he would like to go anywhere just to get out of here. The skeleton asked, so why wander aimlessly like this, since it didn't make much sense? Gu Xiaobai replied that it was a very philosophical question. He was going to think about it. Gu Xiaobai declared that the entire world was his abode, and the meaning of existence was to go wherever his soul desired. The Skeleton King got into a discussion with him. He asked what about the danger along the way. Gu Xiaobai smirked and said jinx out of his heart. He was confident. Skeleton laughed at Gu Xiaobai's actions. He thought he was funny and was glad that Gu Xiaobai stayed. The skeleton had not seen the likes of Gu Xiaobai for very many years. He took to using his strength. The ground beneath Gu Xiaobai's feet began to tremble. The skeleton finally found a successor in the person of Gu Xiaobai. Huge skeleton arms emerged from the ground and surrounded Gu Xiaobai. Gu Xiaobai said that he knew it was an illusion, but pushing it was too much. He was very surprised. The skeleton replied that he was just seeing Gu Xiaobai off, his eyes lighting up. The skeleton had one last question. He was interested in how Gu Xiaobai knew it was an illusion. At this time, the hands were closing tighter and tighter over Gu Xiaobai's head and blocking his view. Gu Xiaobai smirked and asked if the skeleton knew about the radish soup. The strength left Gu Xiaobai's body. He couldn't move at all and was like he was in another world. Gu Xiaobai told Xiao Xiao to spit out his head. The skeleton's head was in the paste of a dog. The skeleton put his head over his body and heard the question of what had happened to him. Sword asked this. He was excited and noticed that Gu Xiaobai had passed out as soon as he entered the castle. Sword was shocked as he looked at the skeleton. He screamed and noticed something was wrong with his level. He upgraded from the 9th lowest to the 9th highest. The skeleton felt like new. Gu Xiaobai was very happy that this had happened. He had read that he had only leveled up because he had lost consciousness. Gu Xiaobai was sure that he could gain more experience if he returned. The skeleton grabbed the sword. He didn't realize what he was doing. Gu Xiaobai was excited for the dream world that awaited him. He was excited for the upcoming experience. Gu Xiaobai spat on the ground and threw the sword beside him. He was very happy. Gu Xiaobai lay like this for a while, however. Nothing happened. Gu Xiaobai couldn't move there anymore. Gu Xiaobai was already losing patience. He didn't realize what he was doing wrong. All his attempts hadn't worked. The sword thought it would take a little longer and wanted to know what had happened to him in the castle. After some time passed, Gu Xiaobai still dared to tell the sword about his adventures in the castle. He explained that the large skeleton had appeared to him in a dream. The sword looked at Gu Xiaobai doubtfully. Sword asked if this was the man sitting on the throne now. The skeleton turned around. Indeed, in front of them was the very same Skeleton King. The sword didn't feel alive in him at all. Gu Xiaobai recognized him. It was definitely the same skeleton. The guy walked up to him. Gu Xiaobai touched the skeleton's hair. He was trying to figure out what was wrong with it. Gu Xiaobai was very surprised. He was covered in a cold port from the realization. Gu Xiaobai backed up. He couldn't believe his eyes. There was something wrong here. That skeleton on the throne was dead, but a few minutes ago he himself was talking to Gu Xiaobai. At this time, General Duming was bravely fighting with the ghost shaman. The guy would strike him, and the guy would defend himself. The shaman was surprised that the tracking spell cast on this skeleton was gone. He was shocked. He needed to understand what had happened. The shaman began to use his power. The shaman smiled. He thought that General Duming was lucky. He would live another day as he had better things to do. The shaman had escaped from hiding in the blink of an eye, which meant he should have reached his goal by now. Suddenly, General Duming saw that it was strange. Something caught his attention. He was shocked. The young man thought he had to go back to the village of Mist. He took his spear and went there. There was a battle going on in the village, with smoke all around and gargoyles flying in the sky. The walls were already at their limit, with skeletons and other creatures attacking them. Tang Minghao felt that they should get rid of the spiders tearing apart the walls. At that moment, a supervisor approached them. One of his men offered the man a taste of tea. The man sipped his tea. He looked very strong. The man placed the empty cup on the tray and remarked that it was excellent tea. Tang Minyo told the chief that it was quite dangerous here. He suggested the man walk to a safer place. The man realized that if the walls were breached, there were no safe places left. He was very determined. He asked Tang Minyo and Xia Xiaoyu for their opinions. Is there any way to repel these spiders by defeating the advanced skeleton squads? Xia Xiaoyu said that of course there was such a possibility, and the artillery was already ready for battle. Behind the girl were several strong guys, ready to do their best to win. Their chief said it was excellent. He was repulsed by the earth and thought it was time to act. He flew off the wall straight down into the thick of the fight. the chief telling the guys not to miss a single spider. Their chief landed with a clatter right in the middle of the cluster of skeletons and scattered them around. This was to buy time for General Du Min Min. The chief was doing great in combat. He used his fighting techniques to throw back the skeletons. The skeletons were afraid of the man. He used the divine strike technique and swung his foot. The man's strength was great. With one blow, he disarmed several skeletons at once. Tang Minyo was overjoyed. He had read that if their chief was in battle, they would definitely be saved. For the chief, this number of opponents was easy to deal with. He easily dealt with all of them. Unexpectedly, the chief's leg became sharply ill. He could not stand on his feet and curled up in pain. The guys standing on the castle wall didn't realize if their chief was okay. They were watching him. The chief had completely forgotten that he wasn't built for close combat. The skeletons were approaching him. It was because the chief was a born mage. He had gathered all his strength and was going to attack. The man used his magical energy to create a blazing vortex. All the skeletons were very scared. A blazing whirlwind surrounded the chief's spear. It looked very formidable and was about to attack. The man was sure that his attack was enough to send all those skeletons to heaven. Tan Minyo said their front line was broken and ordered them to start firing on the spiders. The artillery listened to him. They started firing at the spiders, destroying them one by one. Shang Guanlei was watching it all. He had come to the scene of the battle. On his shoulders sat Mu Yun Yun. The man thought that they seemed to have arrived on time. Shang Guanlei wondered if the skeletons thought they could rebel against the Mist Village. Mu Yun Yun told Shang Guanlei to help them already and join the battle. The man stood up from the ground and shook off the dust on him. He was ready to do it. Shang Guanlei started to use his magical energy. He was very determined to defeat all opponents. At this time, Gu Xiaobai wondered if the skeleton on the big throne was dead. He had no signs of life, so Gu Xiaobai was already almost certain that life had left him. The skeleton did indeed look lifeless, its head hanging out, no expression on its face. At one point, the skeleton's head fell down with a rumble. It even seemed intimidating to everyone. Gu Xiaobai was very scared. He didn't expect this to happen and even cried. At this moment, Xiao Xiao ran up to the skeleton. He grabbed the head in his mouth and held it tightly. Gu Xiaobai was angry at the dog. He asked if the dog wanted him dead. At this time, Xiao Xiao did not let go of the skeleton's head. Gu Xiaobai thought that his dog was only interested in his bones before. Sword asked if Gu Xiaobai was jealous of Xiao Xiao. This was not the case. Gu Xiaobai, on the contrary, was glad that his head would no longer be chewed on. Gu Xiaobai tried to pull the skeleton head out of Xiao Xiao's mouth. He approached it with his hand. However, at that moment, something strange began to happen. The head disappeared from the dog's mouth. Strange, multicolored smoke appeared all around. Everything glowed and began to shimmer. Gu Xiaobai didn't understand what was happening. It seemed to be someone else's magic. He was in shock. Xiao Xiao was very upset that his find had been stolen by someone. He looked up in surprise and was scared of something. Gu Xiaobai didn't understand what was happening to his dog. The latter was almost faint with excitement. Gu Xiaobai turned around in surprise. He decided to see what had scared his dog so much. Behind him was a huge creature that had the body of a dog and 3 heads of different breeds. It was an infernal 3-headed Cerberus. Gu Xiaobai looked at it with astonishment. One of the heads of the 3-headed Cerberus said that Gu Xiaobai had disturbed their master's peace. The other head noticed that the receiver from Gu Xiaobai was strange, and the third head thought it was worth proceeding to the test and seeing what Gu Xiaobai could do. Gu Xiaobai was very scared. He didn't understand what he had done wrong and what else the test was. The dog's eyes glowed red. Gu Xiaobai had to fight them to show that he was worthy. Gu Xiaobai felt like he wouldn't be able to pull off a battle against such a strong opponent. He didn't want to do it. At this moment, Cerberus used the Hell Flamethrower technique. Flames burst out from the dog's mouth. Gu Xiaobai tried to avoid his sad fate. He ran away and wondered if their parents had taught them not to play with fire. The infernal Cerberus looked very intimidating. Now was the time to show what another head could do. Suddenly there was a purple flash. It was very destructive and almost blew the skeleton's head off. The infernal Cerberus was confused, neither head realizing what was going on. One of the dogs asked what they should do next. His ideas were exhausted. Central thought that Gu Xiaobai had been chosen as their master after all. The third head thought that Gu Xiaobai looked very delicious. Her mouth was already drooling. The infernal Cerberus turned backwards towards Gu Xiaobai. It was indeed of enormous size. Gu Xiaobai picked up his sword and decided that it was worth taking action. He wanted to deal with the dog. Gu Xiaobai clutched his sword harder and was ready to attack. Gu Xiaobai struck with his sword, but it went through the dog's body. Gu Xiaobai was very surprised. He didn't expect this, and didn't know how he would defeat this opponent. Gu Xiaobai tried again, however. The result was similar. The sword did not linger in the dog's body. The Hell Cerberus said that they couldn't be defeated with a sword. Gu Xiaobai needed to think of something else. Gu Xiaobai realized that things were bad and it was worth pondering differently on what he should do next. He turned to his inner soul energy and asked to be empowered. Gu Xiaobai used his energy to affect the infernal Cerberus. The latter screamed in agony. Gu Xiaobai raised his sword and commanded spirit energy to slay his opponent. Gu Xiaobai was possessed by a ghost. Behind the guy was a ghost girl who was very angry at this turn of events. Gu Xiaobai was sure that his ghost girl would happily devour their souls. The infernal Cerberus energy began to be absorbed rapidly due to Gu Xiaobai's force. The dogs screamed pitifully. They didn't want to accept such a sad fate. Gu Xiaobai didn't understand what kind of wave of stench came from the dogs. Cerberus begged pitifully for mercy. He was already on his last breath. Gu Xiaobai asked if he had passed their test. The boy was very pleased with himself. The infernal Cerberus said that Gu Xiaobai had passed, and he was now the master of this place. Gu Xiaobai smiled. Everything was going according to his plan. He decided to go. The infernal Cerberus asked before the guy left to fulfill his previous master's wish. Gu Xiaobai looked at the infernal Cerberus with surprise. He didn't understand what the dog was talking about. The Hell Cerberus began to beg Gu Xiaobai to fulfill what he was asking for. It was very important to him. At this time, the shaman was strolling around the lifeless plain. He seemed to be searching for something. The tracking marker was missing at this place. The shaman was very angry. He didn't realize how far Gu Xiaobai had gone. This shaman's name was Sean. He had long white hair. The man was in traditional garb. Sean was killed for finding out something he shouldn't have. He was executed. Sean got his revenge when he was reborn. He killed all his abusers from his past life. However, he still had some work to do. Sean had a bone to pick. This bone of a great undead warrior. It points to his palace. He looked at the bone carefully. Sean felt he had to find him at all costs. He was determined. He couldn't let Gu Xiaobai steal what belonged to him, namely the great undead palace. Sean watched the actions of Gu Xiaobai and his dog through the magic portal. Gu Xiaobai saw Sean watching through that portal, he said, making them wait. He didn't understand how he had found the palace. After all, it had taken him many years to find it. No matter how it was, Sean only wanted to force Gu Xiaobai to return what was rightfully his. Gu Xiaobai was surprised by Sean's actions like this. After all, they had just met and the man was already hostile. Xiao Xiao thought this was outrageous. He activated his demonic zombie strike energy. Sean was amazed that this dog had repelled his strongest attack, which meant it was very strong. It was actually a Hell Cerberus. Gu Xiaobai wondered why its head was on Xiao Xiao. The reason was that all dogs are related. Sean was shocked that he had been overcome by a dog. He couldn't forgive him for that. Sean decided to act. He used the death command technique. Everything around him lit up with purple light. It had a detrimental effect on Gu Xiaobai, and he screamed and experienced severe pain. His soul seemed to be on fire. Something strange was happening to it. The skeleton couldn't resist it. Gu Xiaobai sadly thought that he would die again. This was not the first time this had happened. Gu Xiaobai saw a vision of a young, strong guy. He couldn't believe that he had woken up. Gu Xiaobai didn't realize who the guy was. He looked at him in surprise. The guy said that Gu Xiaobai knew who he was and held out his hand. The boy took the skeleton's hand in his own and asked him to give up his sword. At this moment, something strange began to happen to the skeleton. A red energy rose up. Sean didn't understand what was going on either. Gu Xiaobai had changed in front of his eyes. Now a very different skeleton was now left in front of Sean, a sinister energy radiating out of him. He asked if there were any last words. Shona said that it was enough of a pretense. Even if Gu Xiaobai was able to withstand his spell, he was nothing more than a rank 9 skeleton monster. It looked like someone had taken over the skeleton's body. He looked at his hands and realized he was holding a sword. Sword was scared. He didn't understand what was happening to Gu Xiaobai. Gu Xiaobai said that he was gradually starting to settle down. The guy was serious. Gu Xiaobai was about to show how the sword should be used. He swung and flew into the attack. Gu Xiaobai flew over and thrust his sword into the purple energy shaman. Sean thought that was impossible, and wondered how his spell could have been destroyed by some broken sword. Sword was very angry at such words from the man. He called him a broken sword himself. Sword told Gu Xiaobai to kill Sean to get revenge on him. The guy was fine with it. Gu Xiaobai started attacking the shaman as he looked at him in surprise. Sean used a defense technique, the ice palm. He was able to keep the sword in his hands. However, Gu Xiaobai's strength bombed his defense technique in the blink of an eye, that he was shocked by this turn of events. Sean was confused at not being able to stop the strike of some rank 9 skeleton. The Chengfeng sword is an orthodox ancient sword, and as long as he knows how to handle it, then he will be able to cut through anything. Sean was furious. He told the skeleton to shut up and considered himself just lucky. Sean used the super-ranked ice cave destruction technique. Everything around him was covered in ice. Sean ordered Under the Frost to turn Gu Xiaobai into fine sand. He laughed evilly. However, Gu Xiaobai was calm. He used his sword to overpower his opponent. Gu Xiaobai shattered the Xian ice cave in the blink of an eye with a single movement of his hand. Gu Xiaobai was formidable. He wielded his sword like an extension of his arm. Sean was shocked. He didn't understand why his spell didn't work, or how the skeleton did it. Gu Xiaobai explained that if you cut off the singularity power of spells, they would collapse on their own. As a newborn, Sean's understanding of spellcasting can only be considered mediocre. The shaman knew of the spell singularity point, but didn't understand how it could be cut off by an ordinary skeleton with such an ordinary sword. Sean laughed evilly. He asked, "So what if the skeleton succeeded in shattering his magic? Even if you chopped him in half, he could be resurrected." Gu Xiaobai didn't hesitate to test this. He swung his sword at the shaman. Gu Xiaobai threw punches to the head. Sean was horrified. The man didn't understand how Gu Xiaobai knew where the receptacle of his life was. Sean didn't expect him to die like this, but even so, Gu Xiaobai still wouldn't be able to save Hidden Mist City. It was the last minutes of Sean's life. His eyes lit up green. He was dying. Gu Xiaobai, looking at his suffering, thought that there was only one reason for his death. It consisted of Sean getting too cocky. The skeleton was pleased with himself. At this moment, Gu Xiaobai changed again. The energy around him changed and became more friendly. Sword noticed that Gu Xiaobai was back to his old self. It seemed to Gu Xiaobai as memories that didn't belong to him poured into his skull. However, that guy did not control Gu Xiaobai. On the contrary, that strength and memories seemed to belong to him from the beginning. Xiao Xiao thought that the important thing was that their opponent was killed. The skeleton was in agreement with this and thought it was time to go home. The boys headed away, the shaman's robes left behind. In his cloak lay the bone of an undead lord. It glowed with a special energy. This was the very meaning of the shaman's life. He really wanted to find the undead castle. Someone came over and picked up a bone from the ground. His premonition was correct. It was the headless horseman Rex. He realized it was the aura of an undead lord's soul. Gu Xiaobai together with Xiao Xiao decided to return home. They walked through the empty graveyard. Some moment, Gu Xiaobai saw something unusual. He was very surprised. Gu Xiaobai saw his fellow skeletons returning home. They were overjoyed. Apparently, they felt that their bodies no longer obeyed commands, so they became regular skeletons again. The city of Hidden Mist also seems to have escaped the danger of being attacked and overrun by magical creatures. The brave knights in charge of the city's defense were General Duming, Mu Junyun, and their chief. The battle in the city was over. The soldiers were carrying the wounded to the infirmary, all methinks. Song Chushuan sadly watched the results of this beating. She felt sorry for the people. A young man approached Song Chushuan. He asked what happened to the girl, for she looked saddened. Not knowing what to say to her, she felt embarrassed. She didn't want to tell the man. He was the vice chairman of the Shangguan Shaolei Mercenary Association. He thought that her husband had fallen in battle, and she was very sad to be a widow at such a young age. The man said that poor and young widows were still in high demand, so she had nothing to worry about. Song Chushuan got angry and said that she was not yet of marriageable age. Their dialogue was interrupted by someone. It was a person who approached Shangguan Shaolei and pulled his ear. It was Mu Yunyun. She asked if the man had enough time to flirt with girls. He should have hurried up and gone with her to clear the battlefield. Mu Yunyun pulled Shangguan Shaolei behind her. He shouted loudly and admitted his guilt. The man was afraid that the girl would rip his arm off. Mu Yunyun turned around to Song Chushuan and said that she was strange too, possessing the ability to change gender. Song Chushuan didn't understand what the girl was talking about. She didn't understand what was wrong with these two. After all, their imaginations were worth each other. Song Chushuan was upset that Gu Xiaobai still hadn't returned. She sadly thought that the skeleton might be in the burial ground. It was night in the city. The stars were shining brightly in the sky, and there was no one in the streets. Gu Xiaobai, in the guise of Song Chushuan, was making his way through the city. He looked around and thought that it was good that it was already completely dark. Gu Xiaobai was confident that with Song Chushuan's character, if she was paid, she would be willing to stand in the defense of the city even for a whole day. Hidden Mist City was attacked by skeletons, so Gu Xiaobai in his true form could not enter it. However, if someone were to notice two Song Chushuan at once at the same time, it would be hard to explain it. Sword wondered, what if Song Chushuan thought that Gu Xiaobai had died and was crying now? What should they do in that case? Gu Xiaobai couldn't believe it. After all, the character wasn't like this at all. She wouldn't grieve for him. Gu Xiaobai was sure that it was more like she was calculating the service fee for the defense of the city. Sword thought that was her style. At this moment, Gu Xiaobai noticed someone slicing circles at the gate of the Song residence. Two girls walking in both directions. One of the girls noticed and thought it was Song Chushuan. Apparently they knew each other. The girl was surprised that Song Chushuan was patrolling the city streets with a hellhound. She couldn't believe that the girl was taking part in the day's battle. The sword didn't realize who the girl was. Gu Xiaobai opened the book and read that it was Liu Xiao Xiao, the one that came and went in the 4th chapter. The girl got angry and wanted to clarify that she wasn't worried about Song Chushuan in the slightest. It was just that the elders of the house were worried about her. But they couldn't go after her, so they didn't come to help. Gu Xiaobai in Song Chushuan's body smiled and said that he understood everything. The girl thought that it was Song Chushuan standing in front of her, so should deal with it and hurry home. Liu Xiaoxia was angered by Song Chushuan's tone like this. She thought that the girl didn't believe her and was angry that she was looking down on her. Gu Xiaobai realized that the girl had come to pounce. He didn't understand how one could be so shallow in the eyes of the enemy. At this moment, the real Song Chushuan ran out from around the corner. She was very excited. She thought she heard Gu Xiaobai's voice. Liu Xiaoxiao was shocked when she saw another Song Chushuan that had suddenly appeared. Gu Xiaobai was also shocked. Song Chushuan cried. She was very happy that Gu Xiaobai was fine. She already thought that he would never come back. Liu Xiaoxiao was startled to see two Song Chushuan in front of her. The girl didn't understand what was happening. With Liu Xiaoxiao's astonishment, Liu Xiaoxiao backed up. The girl stepped on her dress. This caused Liu Xiaoxiao to fall right on top of Gu Xiaobai. She couldn't keep her feet. The skeleton was shocked. Liu Xiaoxiao's lips came close to Gu Xiaobai's lips. They almost kissed and were very embarrassed. Liu Xiaoxiao was very embarrassed to have jumped on Gu Xiaobai, however. She thought that Song Chushuan was in front of her. It seemed to the girl that Song Chushuan was somehow different today. Liu Xiaoxiao blushed. An inexplicable aura of reliability emanates from Song Chushuan today. The real Song Chushuan looked at how close Liu Xiaoxiao was to Gu Xiaobai with anger. Song Chushuan called out to Gu Xiaobai. She was waiting for him to explain, seemingly jealous. Liu Xiaoxiao ran away in horror. She thought that she had really crashed into a ghost. Song Chushuan asked how Gu Xiaobai dares to use her looks to have an affair with the one she hates the most. Gu Xiaobai thought that the girl had seen Liu Xiaoxiao come down on him with her own eyes, so it wasn't his fault. Song Chushuan was very worried about Gu Xiaobai, and he still dares to argue with her. The girl was furious. Song Chushuan thought that it was time to re-educate Gu Xiaobai so that he would understand the relationship between master and servant. The next day the sun shone high over the city. It was a clear, calm day. Gu Xiaobai was hanging on the beam, his head separated from his torso. He didn't understand why Song Chushuan was so angry. The skeleton took the risk to help her earn money, but she doesn't realize it. The Sword and Xiaoxiao watched this unusual scene. Sword understood everything. He knew that Gu Xiaobai had no knowledge of girls' hearts at all. Hell's Cerberus has noticed that the key to pleasing the hostess is to constantly get her attention. In his past life, Eo Hellhound was very naughty. He was constantly tearing up his owner's things. Gu Xiaobai thought that it was because of this. The Cerberus lost its essence and became energy. The other Cerberus head knew that when dealing with a girl, one must use biological instincts to win her over. That dog ran up to the house and started rubbing against it. Gu Xiaobai asked him not to do anything like that while he was in Xiaoxiao's body. The third head knew that the most important thing was licking, and as long as a person enjoyed it, no one would refuse to have their feet licked. This head was already imagining licking Song Chushuan's feet as she sat on the throne. Gu Xiaobai think it sounds reasonable, except that skeletons don't have languages. Silence hung in their courtyard, ideas running out, no one knew what to say. Gu Xiaobai asked the swordsman to put it down. He didn't dare to do so, and offered to talk about it when Song Chushuan returned from school. The school was a huge Chinese-style building, and it was a clear day outside. Song Chushuan had gym class on her schedule. She didn't want to change clothes next to Liu Xiaoxiao. Considering what happened last night, she would definitely mock Song Chushuan because of her breast size. The girl was lucky to have found this unused storage room. She wanted to get a quick change of clothes and get out. Song Chushuan put on her sports uniform. It was shorts and a t-shirt. At that moment, the girl noticed something strange in the pantry. There was some kind of mark on the floor. Song Chushuan walked over to her. She felt like she was slightly even glowing. The tag was round in shape and had hieroglyphics inside. It glowed with a green light. A dark energy suddenly began to emerge from the tag. It rushed towards Song Chushuan. This energy attacked Song Chushuan's soul. The girl thought that something had to be done. If Song Chushuan lost consciousness, she might as well die. The girl could no longer stand on her feet. Song Chushuan removed her breastplate with a sharp movement of her hand. The girl threw it at the door and thus broke through it. At the same time, a man was walking down the corridor. The man looked through the hole in the door and didn't understand what was going on here. Song Chushuan was unconsciously lying on the floor. She was very sick. Gu Xiaobai also felt something strange. It was as if he had been electrocuted. He used the automatic splicing and put his body back together piece by piece. The strength of the master contract from the servant suddenly weakened. He did not understand what had happened to Song Chushuan. Gu Xiaobai rushed to Song Chushuan's aid. The girl was lying unconscious. He asked what happened. A man who was passing by and didn't know it himself. By the time he arrived on the scene, Song Chushuan was already lying unconscious. Song Chushuan had damaged her divine consciousness, but nothing unusual could be found at the scene by the man. Sword didn't understand why the man being a teacher didn't take her to the doctor and instead brought her home. Maybe he had other plans for her. The teacher shouted that he wasn't like that. He started to make excuses and asked to convince Gu Xiaobai of his sword of his innocence. Song Chushuan woke up briefly. The girl was very weak, but she was able to open her eye. Song Chushuan said that she was the one who asked the teacher to take her back home. It was her wish. She felt like there was no need to alarm the other classmates and cause a panic. She was going to take a nap tonight, and tomorrow everything would be fine. Teacher expected something like this from Song Chuxuan with the highest grades, because she has such a good heart. In fact, Song Chuxuan just didn't want Liu Xiaoxiao to know about this incident, especially the involvement with the bib. The teacher needed to go back to school and thoroughly investigate everything about the incident. He asked Gu Xiaobai to take care of the girl. Gu Xiaobai thought that Teacher Li was not going to take responsibility for this incident. Song Chuxuan explained that in a way, he had saved her, so the girl was very grateful to him. Gu Xiaobai's imagination had already played out, imagining Song Chuxuan and Teacher Li's relationship. He thought because of the suspension bridge effect, after which the student secretly falls in love with her teacher, and the affectionate teacher doesn't mind her skinny figure at all. The skeleton thought that he had ruined her forbidden love, a complete failure on his part. Song Chuxuan was angry that Gu Xiaobai called her skinny. Song Chuxuan thought that, on the other hand, her condition was definitely unlikely to improve in just one night. But if someone found out about her illness, Liu Xiaoxiao would bully her. Therefore, Song Chuxuan had a plan. She had thought of everything and smiled slyly. Gu Xiaobai stopped her. He doesn't want to hear what the girl is about to say now. The girl told Gu Xiaobai to copy her appearance and go to school instead. That was an order. The next day, life in the city went on as usual, the sun shining high in the sky. In Dio's bakery, the man spotted Song Chuxuan of the Song family. He turned around at her in surprise. The man didn't understand why the girl was so beautifully dressed up today. It was actually Gu Xiaobai in the guise of Song Chuxuan. Gu Xiaobai really didn't want to do this. However, there was nothing left for him to do after all. This was the mistress's assignment. Gu Xiaobai had never seen Song Chuxuan in uniform before. He wondered why on earth he needed to wear this. Gu Xiaobai thought that if Song Chuxuan wanted him to wear something like this, she had better kill him. This was the time Gu Xiaobai in the guise of Song Chuxuan noticed Liu Xiaoxiao. The girl approached him. She thought that every road is narrow for enemies. She didn't like having to meet on the way to school. Ever since Liu Xiaoxiao had joined the school, she had never once managed to defeat Song Chuxuan in anything other than breast size. Song Chuxuan always won in sports competitions. She was also better in her studies. Liu Xiaoxiao believed that it was because of Song Chuxuan that she could not be perfect. The girl was her nemesis. Gu Xiaobai turned around and looked at Liu Xiaoxiao. She thought that Song Chuxuan was now thinking of what rude words to use to mess with her today. Gu Xiaobai didn't think of anything like that. He didn't know how to get to school and completely forgot to ask about it. Gu Xiaobai noticed Liu Xiaoxiao and ran up to her. He wanted to ask her how to get to school. At this moment, the guy stopped, because judging from Song Chuxuan's attitude towards her, if he was to be quite friendly with the girl, he would definitely be scolded later. Gu Xiaobai felt that he needed to show strength, and if he underestimated her, he would definitely lose. Gu Xiaobai ran up to the girl and asked if Liu Xiaoxiao was going to school. Liu Xiaoxiao asked if Song Chuxuan realized what nonsense he was talking now. Gu Xiaobai pinned the girl against the wall. He was going to be tough on her. Gu Xiaobai approached Liu Xiaoxiao and said that they had a very fortunate meeting. Gu Xiaobai in the guise of Song Chuxuan asked if Liu Xiaoxiao would tell him the way. Liu Xiaoxiao blushed all red. She was embarrassed by Song Chuxuan being so close to her. At this time, someone approached the walls of the city. He was looking at them carefully. It was the Headless Horseman and his faithful companion, the bear. They believed that the one they were looking for must be in this human city. At this moment, the Headless Rider saw something. He was very surprised. The doors of the city opened, and two men stood behind them. It was General Zhang Yuan, Du Ming, he thought. Just a short while ago, only in the Hidden Mist City did things become peaceful. The second was Shangguan Lei, the director of the Mercenary Association, and he said that a danger was approaching. A Headless Horseman. The Headless Horseman was watching them. He noticed they had some power. The Headless Horseman said that these gatekeepers were only wasting their talents and told them to let them pass. Shangguan Li stopped the rider. He asked who it was that he called gatekeepers. They didn't open the gate to welcome him. The Headless Horseman had come in the name of his lord's justice, and men would not stop him. Shangguan Lei laughed. He found the words about fairness amusing. The man stated that as a guardian of justice, he sees the Headless Horseman's entire body radiating anger. There is no justice here. General Du Ming thought that Shangguan Lei had started his shuffle again. The Headless Horseman's heart as well as his deeds were pure, in his opinion, and everything he did was just. Shangguan Lei wasn't going to let anyone be more fair than him. General Du Ming felt that the two of them couldn't stop the rider, so the only thing left to do was to let him pass in peace. After all, he was the only foul man with a strong sense of justice, so he shouldn't do anything weird in the city. However, the man found it odd that the Headless Rider was talking about his lord. At this very time, it was a school day at Song Chuxuan School, and the students were engaged in classes. Gu Xiaobai in the guise of Song Chuxuan sat at the desk and listened to the teacher. Sitting next to him was Liu Xiaoxiao. The girl was all red and almost crying. Their classmates noticed that Liu Xiaoxiao didn't look like herself today. Wang Zijun thought that it was definitely because of Song Chuxuan after all. They never got to see her after her headless horseman forced them out of Song's house. Lu Tao had heard that Song Chuxuan had participated in the battle to defend the city. But her rider wasn't there. He thought that she hadn't made a contract with him. The guys thought that although Song Chuxuan had good grades, but her strength was worthless, and she would soon make a fool of herself. A headless horseman approached the guys from behind. He didn't understand how these weaklings dared to criticize the Lord. Gu Xiaobai along with Liu Xiaoxiao turned around and looked at the rider. They didn't understand where this powerful, undead spiritual energy was coming from. The headless horseman overpowered the two boys. He lifted them into the air with his power. They were unconscious. The headless horseman found it very boring that the guys gave up so quickly. He stood in the middle of the office. Song Chuxuan's classmates thought that this was Song Chuxuan's contract pet. They were very frightened, for the creature was very strong. Gu Xiaobai understood that his soul fire was capable of materializing and lifting people up. It was an unfathomable power. Gu Xiaobai is not sure if he has even a tiny chance of winning if the headless horseman is here to take revenge on him. The headless horseman took one of the school chairs. No one realized what he was doing. Ryder sat down at the desk and was surprised by this aura. He realized that meant Gu Xiaobai had truly inherited the Undead Lord's will. Gu Xiaobai didn't really understand what he was talking about. Then he realized that he was talking about a huge skeleton. The headless horseman is related to the Undead Lord in some way. More details later. Liu Xiaoxiao was scared of her pet's true countenance. She was scared as if her whole body was freezing. Gu Xiaobai explained that the rider only looked fierce and still had a nasty temper. But as such, he was quite talkative. The headless horseman didn't understand why Gu Xiaobai was so close to an ordinary woman, the future successor of the Undead Lord. Looking at Liu Xiaoxiao, the rider realized everything. Her soul is pure and sweet, so she can be a great companion for Gu Xiaobai after death. The rider apologized for not paying attention to Gu Xiaobai's undead bride-to-be. The guy was very angry. This was the first time he had heard of this. Ryder felt that since Gu Xiaobai's fiancé Gu Xiaobai was alive, their souls should become closer. The headless horseman used her strength and pushed Liu Xiaoxiao towards Gu Xiaobai. The girl fell right onto her chest and clung tightly to her rival. She was having déjà vu. The situation was repeating itself. All the classmates watched this picture with surprise. They didn't understand why Liu Xiaoxiao rushed into Song Chuxuan's arms. Liu Xiaoxiao got angry and started yelling at Song Chuxuan. She was going to kill her. At that moment, the teacher came into the room and suggested that they start the lesson. In it, they were to talk about the undead. The man noticed that the classroom was very quiet today. The boys were rarely so obedient. At this time, there was a headless horseman sitting at one of the desks. Everyone else was afraid of him. He traveled all the way here for the Undead Lord's treasure trove. Gu Xiaobai didn't understand what treasury the rider was talking about, he asked him. The palace of the Undead Lord is not in the same place as the place of his penance. He moved here for security purposes from the treasury. No undead knows the location of the treasury. The rider knew that the Undead Lord's heart was full of worries, so his soul still didn't want to calm down. The rider once submitted a pardon in front of the temple. If ever he could behold the heavenly treasures, he would treat the heir as his lord. Since Gu Xiaobai is the Undead Lord's heir, he should know the location of the treasure trove. Gu Xiaobai didn't understand how this happened, and why this stupid three-headed dog didn't say anything to him. The headless horseman searched the entire burial ground but could not find the treasury. He realized she was in the city of Hidden Fog in this school. Gu Xiaobai didn't know anything about it. He awkwardly looked at the headless rider. Headless horseman believed that in order to uncover the mystery of the treasure, Gu Xiaobai had to disguise himself as a girl and sneak into this school. Gu Xiaobai wondered if the rider had had the surname D during his lifetime. The headless horseman asked when they would go after the treasure. Gu Xiaobai was surprised at this disposition of the rider. At this time, the teacher was explaining the theme of the lesson, about how the fire of the soul drives the action of changing lives. He was very angry that Gu Xiaobai and the rider were talking. He told them to answer the question. The headless horseman queried the question if he had. How does soul fire control the undead? Gu Xiaobai asked. If he answered, he wouldn't get any additional assignments. The teacher was very frightened and fainted. The headless horseman asked if they would go in search of the treasury at lunchtime. Gu Xiaobai and the headless horseman went there. Gu Xiaobai didn't understand how something like this could even be in school. This was the time someone called out to Song Chuxuan and asked if she was already feeling better. It was Teacher Lu. Gu Xiaobai replied that he was already fine and thanked him for his help. The room in which the incident happened was now closed, but so far there was still no way to find what had injured Song Chuxuan. This room has always been used as a storeroom. One is left to suspect that one of the items left behind has dangerous spiritual powers. Gu Xiaobai said that it was no big deal. Song Chuxuan wasn't going to go near this place anymore anyway. Gu Xiaobai waved at the teacher and said goodbye to him. Gu Xiaobai thought it was very suspicious. He wanted to go in and scout it out for himself. The Headless Horseman thought that they would make an excellent duo, as Gu Xiaobai was going to do his best for a good cause. Gu Xiaobai noticed that the rider's sense of justice seemed to be slightly affected. Gu Xiaobai inquired as to what he should call the rider. He could be called Rexar. And Gu Xiaobai, along with Rexar, went to look for suspicious clues. Gu Xiaobai was going to take advantage of Rexar's misunderstanding. After all, there was nothing wrong with using free power. Gu Xiaobai looked into the storeroom. There didn't seem to be anyone there. The Headless Horseman asked if the treasury was here, for it was the most inconspicuous place. Gu Xiaobai said that since Rexar was hungry for treasure, he would leave the search to him. The rider used the death possession technique and began searching the room for treasures. His power had already covered the entire room. There was something beneath the shabby box that repelled his power. It was a little box with sunflowers on it. Gu Xiaobai thought it was strange. He decided to check this box. Gu Xiaobai saw the light underneath. He reached for the box. Gu Xiaobai lifted up the box. Underneath it was indeed the same mark. Gu Xiaobai, along with the Headless Rider, were very surprised. This force had affected them as well. At that moment, an entrance in the floor opened, and in it was a ladder. It was the entrance to the crypt. The boys were very surprised. Gu Xiaobai believed that this was the same force that attacked Song Chuxuan here. The Headless Horseman stopped him. He thought it was dangerous to approach too fast. Rexar knew that the entrance was equipped with a magical formation, and even his mastery of death would not compare to it. Gu Xiaobai thought that it was strange that the entrance didn't react to humans in any way. Maybe undead and human interaction was necessary for it to open. Rexar noticed something at this moment. He immediately shared his observations. The rider didn't understand why Gu Xiaobai had made a slave contract with the man, and why he had become his servant. Gu Xiaobai knew that the rider's soul force was powerful. He had figured it all out just by touching him. Rexar thought that Gu Xiaobai had been tricked by a man, and such a disgrace was unfair. He was going to kill this man. After a while, someone knocked very hard on the door of Song Chuxuan's house. Sword didn't understand what the chiseling was about. The guest must have had bad intentions. It was a Headless Horseman, running away from a skeleton who was trying to explain what he had argued. Behind the Headless Horseman ran his bear. Gu Xiaobai told the Cerberus that the rider wanted to kill Song Chuxuan and asked him to help stop it. Cerberus ran up to Rexar, thinking that he was here because he was following the Lord's heir, so he should listen to him. The Headless Horseman was about to wash away the Lord's shame, and no one could stop him. At that moment, a cat in the guise of a man appeared. He asked if Rexar was so sure. The Headless Rider didn't realize who was in front of him. The sword was pissed off at seeing the cat again. Gu Xiaobai clutched at the cat's clothes and pitifully asked for help. He is firmly bound to Song Chuxuan by a contract of master and favor, and he can't watch at her death. The cat leaned over to the skeleton and stroked his head. He wondered if the skeleton was sincere. Gu Xiaobai explained that if he lost his master, it could lead to a bloodbath. The cat remarked that it sounded disgusting. The cat told the rider that if he didn't like the master and servant contract, he could change it to an equal contract. Rexar thought it foolish. For a contract affects his soul, it is not so easily changed. The cat touched Gu Xiaobai's chest and began to use his strength. The master and servant contract did change to equal because of the cat's power. Luckily, the skeleton had already taken off its disguise. Otherwise, something terrible would happen if Song Chuxuan found out that the cat was pawing her breasts. Under an equal contract, the guys will now maintain an everlasting strong friendship and equally share the benefits and help each other. The Headless Horseman still wanted to meet Song Chuxuan in person to see if she was worthy of Gu Xiaobai. The skeleton exhaled a sigh of relief. He was blown away. The cat said he had done a great favor and asked if he had something he could offer in return. Skeleton had a bad feeling. He didn't know what favor he could do for the cat. The cat brought something with her and asked if the skeleton would like to talk to her. Gu Xiaobai realized who he was talking about. He wasn't mentally prepared for this yet. It was a ghost girl. She was happy to see Gu Xiaobai and hugged him. Gu Xiaobai didn't understand why the cat let her out. The cat just didn't want to look after the girl like a small child every day, and she had become much more educated. The Pedzrak girl had many challenges to overcome, but now they will always be together. Gu Xiaobai didn't want this, because if she continued to not care about the skeleton's soul flame, there would always be none. Rexar remarked that it was unexpected that Gu Xiaobai had another daughter-in-law, in addition to a living daughter-in-law. The ghost girl got very angry when she heard about her sister-in-law being alive. The ghost flew up to Gu Xiaobai and angrily asked who this girl was. Gu Xiaobai was upset. After all, he had asked Rexar not to fan the flames. Rexar came to look at Song Chuxuan. She was sleeping peacefully in her bed. Gu Xiaobai followed him along with the ghost girl. They showed Song Chuxuan to the rider. The Headless Rider realized that the girl had Taiyin's body. Girls born on the night of the full moon in the month of the moon can acquire the Taiyin body by bathing in moonlight immediately after birth. That was the story of Song Chuxuan. A little girl was left in a basket under the moon. The entrance to the crypt was activated by absorbing Taiyin's power. You need the entrance to absorb some more of Song Chushuan's power, then it will fully open. Gu Xiaobai asked to stop thinking about treasures. After all, he must have a sense of justice. The headless horseman had completely lost his mind. Gu Xiaobai realized the absurdity of his words. Song Chushuan had no signs of improvement. Gu Xiaobai felt that it was better to help her first, only after going on a treasure hunt. The ghost girl was surprised that they were in a partnership. She thought he had a partner in addition to a living daughter-in-law. Gu Xiaobai was surprised that the girl had only heard the word partnership out of the entire sentence. The red cat quickly ran off. He had brought the ghost so he could go about his business. The skeleton had nothing to do. It would have to look for someone who could heal Song Chushuan. The ghost wanted to go too. The cat had taught her the technique of closing her soul, so no one but the undead could see it. Gu Xiaobai certainly didn't want this, but there were no other options. Gu Xiaobai still couldn't prevent the girl. Rexar suggested splitting up. The guys came to Ling Ling's house. They were looking for medicine or someone who could adjust the yin in the body. Gu Xiaobai asked the girl to help him with this. After all, they were previously acquainted. Ling Ling didn't understand why Mr. Chen had published such a task, whether he wanted to adjust the yin-yang circulation. Ling Ling looked at Gu Xiaobai carefully. She noticed something strange. The skeleton had contentedly thin arms and legs for an adventurer. He didn't seem to lack Yang's energy. The girl immediately started imagining something strange. Yang's energy was masculine, so scenes with Shangguan Shaolei popped up in her mind. Ling Ling blushed all red. She was embarrassed by her own thoughts. At this time, Shangguan Shaolei got goosebumps and almost choked on his tea. Lin Lin told the guys to ignore her. She was going to put their assignment on the board. Gu Xiaobai wasn't sure if he could take on the yin-yang customization task. Yuan Feng approached the guys. She introduced herself. The girl specialized in yin-yang fist-fighting techniques and could help them. Gu Xiaobai once flipped through a book about this technique in the burial ground. In the left yang and in the right yin, the two fists complement each other. They destroy evil spirits and enemies as well as heal diseases. Yuan Feng was going to demonstrate her strength. She thought that the yin qi pressing on Gu Xiaobai's head, the girl could relieve him of his pain. Yuan Feng swung her left fist with yang energy at Gu Xiaobai. This energy worked on the ghost girl. It hit her and scared her. The ghost girl fearfully hid behind Gu Xiaobai's back. She didn't know what to do. Yuan Feng was pleased with herself and asked if the yin qi had settled over Gu Xiaobai's head. At least the girl had demonstrated that she was really proficient in the technique. Gu Xiaobai felt that he should take her to Song Chushuan. Gu Xiaobai did so. When Yuan Feng saw Song Chushuan, she realized that things were completely bad here. Tai Yin's body is experiencing a great loss of yin qi, and if not treated, she will simply die. The girl couldn't guarantee a cure. But it would be better to try than to do nothing, she asked, removing her outer clothing. Song Chushuan angrily looked at one Gu Xiaobai. The skeleton understood everything. He should have left. Song Chushuan was very embarrassed. She asked if it was really necessary for the treatment. Yuan Feng replied that it was necessary. The girl was going to start the treatment. Yuan Feng used the yin right fist technique. This energy hit Song Chushuan's chest. She felt strange. Song Chushuan asked where is Yuan Feng touching her. The latter told her not to move, so her fist turns into claws. Song Chushuan's energy is coming out of this chest, so it needs to be replenished. Song Chushuan was completely undressed and felt awkward. However, if the treatment goes glacko, the yang may even double. Song Chushuan became embarrassed and asked Yuan Feng to be more gentle with her. The ghost girl asked the skeleton if Song Chushuan was really that important to him. Skeleton explained that he had a contractual relationship with her, so it was best not to bother. Being a ghost girl was too preoccupied with Gu Xiaobai's relationships with other girls. Gu Xiaobai realized that he still didn't know the ghost girl's name. The girl sadly said she couldn't remember it at the moment of death. Anger overrode all her memories of life. Gu Xiaobai suggested giving her a name. He thought that Gu Liner would be a good option. This was the name Gu Xiaobai's late sis had, which was why he chose it. The ghost girl became embarrassed. She really liked this name and was astonished by such a gesture from Gu Xiaobai. However, she was embarrassed that he gave her a sis name. Apparently, such was his sexual preference in life. The three-headed Cerberus realized that Gu Xiaobai had never given him a name and asked the guy to do so. Gu Xiaobai hesitated. He couldn't think of a suitable name for the Hellhound. Gu Xiaobai finally came up with the idea of naming the dog after Gu Xiaosan. However, the dog didn't like it. At this moment, Liu Xiaoxiao walked into the gate of their house. Gu Xiaobai didn't understand what she was doing here. Gu Xiaobai thought that he should quickly hide Gu Ling'er before she had hostile intentions again, or she would inadvertently attract death. Liu Xiaoxiao noticed that Song Chushuan was leaving school early for the second day in a row. Perhaps she had something wrong. However, the girl thought, what did she care if she ran away now? Song Chushuan would only take advantage of it. The girl wanted to settle the score. Liu Xiaoxiao thought that Song Chushuan's brain was skewed, otherwise would she do such things to her? Liu Xiaoxiao opened the door to Song Chushuan's room and asked if she was sick. The girl had always known that she had a weak body. When she opened the door, the girl saw the strange quarantine of a stripped Song Chushuan lying in bed with Yuan Feng. Liu Xiaoxiao was embarrassed and thought that Song Chushuan had completely lost her shame for skipping school to do such things. The girl flushed and ran away. Gu Xiaobai didn't understand what was going on and asked if they were done. Yuan Feng said not yet, however. There was no more strength left. Song Chushuan was already exhausted. Given Yuan Feng's abilities, it would not be possible to cure everything at once. It would take several sessions. If the guys had medicine, it was better to let Song Chushuan take it now. Gu Xiaobai tasked Rexar with finding the medicine. He had no idea how the rider was doing right now. Yuan Feng hinted about the reward for the task. Gu Xiaobai gave the girl half of the reward, because she had not fully cured Song Chushuan. Meanwhile, the Headless Horseman rode his bear across the burial ground. To prepare the pill, he needs a misty concentration herb to regulate yin qi. The burial ground was inhabited by gargoyles. There were a huge number of them, some flying in the sky. They were surprised that the Headless Horseman had come to them again. Rexar asked how dare a lowly gargoyle of the 8th rank treat him like that. The gargoyle told him to shut up. Shangbo had been tricked by the once, pretending to be a headless knight, causing them all to be ambushed by humans. And Rexar's excuses were exactly like his. The gargoyles weren't going to fall into the same trap. Rexar thought that he had lived in his own territory for too long, since the burial ground had begun to forget his name. In that case, Rexar was going to hunt after such a long absence. The Headless Rider used the riding mode and directed his power at the gargoyles. The gargoyle immediately realized that the Headless Horseman was real and admitted his mistake. The gargoyle felt it was far better for her to remain a pile of rubble after all. After a while, Rexar went in search of a cure again. He found the flower he needed, but the petals had already been ripped off. Rexar fell to his knees in front of Gu Xiaobai. He apologized for failing in his task. Gu Xiaobai looked at the Headless Horseman with astonishment. He didn't understand what had happened. Rexar couldn't find a single petal of the mist concentration grass as a healing herb capable of restoring Taiyin's body. Gu Xiaobai had said before that he had this herb. He took out the flower petals from his pocket. The rider rejoiced. As expected of his lord, he had anticipated the need for misty grass concentration beforehand. All the materials to make the medicine were ready. Gu Xiaobai asked if Rexar would take care of it. Yuan Feng stopped them. If a Headless Horseman was in charge of making medicine, only the undead would be able to use it. Gu Xiaobai didn't understand why Yuan Feng had come back. He had already paid her. Lately, the girl is in a very sensitive situation, and the previous money is no longer enough, and there are no other suitable assignments for the guild right now. Yuan Feng said that she could take away and haggle for them. The girl asked to pay her the appropriate price. Gu Xiaobai told her to speak more clearly or she might be misunderstood. A strange thought appeared in Gu Ling'er's mind. Yuan Feng took the guys to the place where the alchemist lives. There is no more suitable person to treat Taiying's body. Yuan Feng thought that having connections was valuable. If the guys just let the alchemist know the girl's name, he would craft a medicine for them for free. Gu Xiaobai was surprised that they had such a good relationship. Yuan Feng alone would definitely not go to him. His craziness was not easy to deal with. As a reward, the girl asked for the remaining materials to be given to her. There were many poisonous plants of all sorts planted in this courtyard, and that man clearly didn't have everything at home. Rexar thought he was up to no good. The Headless Horseman was raring to do justice, but Gu Xiaobai restored him. Gu Xiaobai kicked him out of the alchemist's courtyard and asked him not to cause trouble. Sword noticed that more and more cheerful types began to gather around Gu Xiaobai. He was like an elderly babysitter. Gu Xiaobai went into the alchemist's house and asked if there was anyone there. He called out Yuan Feng's name. A small man stood in the middle of the room, with flasks of unusual medicines everywhere around him. The alchemist rejoiced that she had finally extracted a brand new poison from the oleander. This poison deserves to be called the most poisonous weed in the world, for oleander is the best in the whole world. The alchemist said that Gu Xiaobai had come here for nothing. He already knew what the guy had come for. Gu Xiaobai was very surprised. After all, he hadn't revealed anything about his intentions yet. The alchemist could smell the medicinal herb that Gu Xiaobai had brought, and judging from the smell, it was an ingredient to bring back yin. Gu Xiaobai was surprised that the man could distinguish herbs by smell from such a distance. The alchemist explained that the most important ingredient for the cure, the mist concentration grass, was not easy to obtain, and without it, the cure could not be made. Gu Xiaobai said that this was something the alchemist could not worry about. The guy had it with him. The alchemist was shocked by the color of the petals after all. Only a flower that had been gathering yin energy for 1,000 years could possess such a color. The alchemist has agreed to make medicine for the skeleton. We'll take the remaining ingredients as payment. Gu Xiaobai thanked the chemist and thought it was good that he didn't even spend a penny. The alchemist had created a medicine for Song Chushuan as promised. Gu Xiaobai hoped that it could help the girl. The alchemist smiled suspiciously. The man licked his lips. The alchemist kept thinking that he would not succeed. However, this herb was delivered to his door just in time. The guys returned home to Song Chushuan. The girl was lying on the bed with a pained look. Gu Xiaobai gave the girl the medicine. She opened her eyes. The sword realized that the medicine was working. Song Chuxuan thought that Gu Xiaobai had once again spent money on some useless things. Gu Xiaobai believed that nothing was more important than one's own body, so all the money spent on medicine was not in vain. Song Chuxuan disagreed with him. She was certain that there was something more important. Song Chuxuan never told the reason why she decided to save money. The reason was because Song Chuxuan wants to buy back her family's real residence that was occupied by the Liu family. Until her 5th birthday, Song Chuxuan lived with her parents in their present Song family estate. At that time, they were forced to move, and Liu Xiaoxiao's family moved into their former home. 4 years later, Song Chuxuan's parents left home, and they still hadn't returned. The girl had no idea when they would decide to return. All Song Chuxuan can do now is desperately save up the money to buy back the estate. Even the moment Mist City arrived, Gu Xiaobai noticed that Song Chuxuan had a story to tell. Gu Xiaobai said that there is a treasure hunt opportunity. The place where Song Chuxuan started to feel ailment is the entrance to the secret cave. Song Chuxuan rejoiced. She was ready to go. The girl had been sick for so long, and someone had even managed to take advantage of it. She was going to devastate this place. Rexar was against the idea. He didn't want a human to come in contact with the Lord's treasures. He couldn't watch the living desecrate the treasures of the undead. Gu Xiaobai stated that he was the successor of the Undead Lord, and he would have the final say. If Rexar wanted to go down with him, he should accept it. Since they were planning to take a person with them, the writer suggested to take Yuanfeng as well. After all, according to him, there might be places in the cave that required yin-yang strength. Gu Xiaobai thought that since they were going out in such a crowd, they wouldn't be able to avoid the attention from the school. Rexar considered himself justice, so he could go in wherever he wanted and no one would question him. Song Chuxuan thought that if she reported that her condition required her to be personally accompanied by friends with special abilities, the school should give the okay. Gu Xiaobai thought that it wasn't a bad idea, and this way everyone would be able to enter the school unhindered. The only thing Gu Xiaobai didn't understand was how he would be able to get into the school. The next day, the guys went to Song Chuxuan's school as they were going to put their plan into action. They turned to Teacher Lu. Song Chuxuan informed them that she needed an attendant. The teacher said it was possible, but it would be better to recuperate at home with peace of mind. Song Chuxuan replied that if she continued to skip class like this, she wouldn't be able to keep her place as the best student in the class. Teacher Lu thought that it would be good for the other students to be just as determined. The teacher told Wang Zijun and Lu Tao to remember to stop by his office during the lunch break. The boys were clearly on to something. They agreed with the teacher with a downcast look. Lu Tao didn't understand what was good about high grades. After all, Song Chuxuan was still not as good in terms of talent, character, and beauty as Liu. At that moment, the guys heard someone's voice from behind their back. She was asking where the living bride lived. It was Gu Linner. She approached the guys with an intimidating look and told them to capture and kill her. The boys were very frightened. They cried and ran away. Gu Xiaobai was just looking for Gu Linner. He didn't understand where she had run off to. Gu Xiaobai had already been tracking her for so long, and the girl had run away to school. And Gu Xiaobai told her to stop. He was going to teach Gu Linner a lesson today. The girl didn't mind. She flew up to Gu Xiaobai and pressed her chest against him. Gu Linner asked what Gu Xiaobai was going to do to her. If he didn't tell her, she wouldn't be able to understand. Gu Xiaobai really didn't make this up. He coughed and told her to pretend that no one had seen her. Gu Xiaobai had come for a legitimate reason, as Song Chuxuan's escort, and this should not raise suspicion. Song Chuxuan and her attendants walked down the corridor of the school. The boys entered the storeroom. Rexar showed Song Chuxuan the entrance to the treasury and told the girl to come closer. Rexar had prepared the rest of the medicine in case Song Chuxuan became uncomfortable, and Yuanfeng would help the girl with her recovery. Song Chuxuan understood everything. She was determined to open the treasury and make their plan a reality. Song Chuxuan approached the entrance of the treasury. It activated. It seems the seal of the formation had absorbed enough of the yin-qi of the living person and the spiritual power of the dead, and was now lifted. Rexar decided he needed to go down. If there was any danger, the boys would just have to get behind him. Gu Xiaobai went next. He told the girls to go down last. Safety was paramount. At this time, Liu Xiaoxiao passed by the storeroom. She noticed some movements in it. The girl saw Song Chuxuan and Yuanfeng. They were talking. Liu Xiaoxiao saw Yuanfeng leaning closer and closer to Song Chuxuan. The girl had unseemly thoughts. Those two were no longer visible. Liu Xiaoxiao didn't understand why the girls were laying down and what it was they were doing at school. Liu Xiaoxiao ran out of the school in shock. She was going to complain to the teacher about Song Chuxuan. At this time, Xiaoxiao and the headless horseman bear were waiting in the schoolyard. They were too big, so they couldn't go with the guys. The guys descended into the Undead Lord's treasury. Gu Xiaobai looked around. The treasury was really huge. There were a lot of fancy things in there. Gu Xiaobai thought it looked like a museum. Rexar was beyond happy. He was sure that this was the treasury of the Lord of the Netherworld. There could be no mistake. Rexar opened a large chest. It seemed to be exactly what the Headless Horseman was looking for. The chest contained the secret novels of the elegant undead lord. It was something like a diary. Rexar sat back in his chair and thought it necessary to scrutinize them carefully. Gu Xiaobai didn't understand how this could be a treasure trove, after all. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was more than a treasure trove. Yuanfeng suggested that the guys split up and search for treasures they could use. At this time, Gu Ling'er was looking at the books on the shelf. Gu Xiaobai asked if the girl had found anything. Gu Ling'er held the books on the ghost resurrection technique and husband control writing. Gu Xiaobai told Gu Ling'er not to look at that useless mountain of trash, especially the one about her husband. At this time, right in front of Gu Xiaobai's face, something flew. He thought it was an ambush attack. At this time, Yuanfeng was crying tears of joy. Her dream had finally come true. The girl had always dreamed of a weapon with tremendous killing power in a single touch. This she fired. Yuanfeng started to use her find again. She shot around. The boys asked her to calm down and terrified ran from her trying to escape. Gu Xiaobai paused for a second. He realized that he hadn't seen Song Chuxuan for a long time. At this time, the girl also found some treasures that interested her. She was amazed. She opened the chest that contained the breast enlargement pills. Beside them lay the glowing pearl of 1,000,000 nights. Song Chuxuan looked at her two finds, and she reached her hand for the pill. However, the pearl disappeared. And when Song Chuxuan grabbed the pearl, all the pills disappeared in that second. However, the girl thought she wanted everything at once and quickly pounced on two things. Gu Xiaobai didn't think that it wasn't all wrong. The sword believed that everyone got what they needed the most. Gu Xiaobai hesitated. He wondered what useful treasure he would encounter. So far, however, the skeleton had only found useless rusty junk. The sword declared that it was not useless rusty junk, but sage mithril, cold meteoric iron, and stellar gold. Sword was going to eat it all up. It had been a long time since he had eaten such delicious metal to strengthen his body. Next to the pile of various metals, the sword saw a black puddle. From this puddle, the figure of a man appeared in the blink of an eye and held a knife to the skeleton's neck. Gu Xiaobai was surprised that this man had slashed his neck in one fell swoop. This person was very surprised to see Gu Xiaobai. He was clearly not friendly. The man from the puddle was about to attack again. He got into a fighting stance. Gu Xiaobai thought that it was the assassin who had been in the museum all this time, and had been secretly following them. Gu Xiaobai was confident that he would make him open his mouth, and after battles, he understood how to properly use his sword. Gu Xiaobai used the vertical strike technique and swung his sword. However, suddenly, Gu Xiaobai's hand fell away from his body and remained on his sword. The guy didn't understand what was happening, why this was happening to him. The sword fell to the ground and embedded itself into the floor, Gu Xiaobai's hand on its hilt. Gu Xiaobai might have really understood how to use a sword, but his current strength wasn't enough to master swordsmanship. Gu Xiaobai was very scared that he couldn't defeat the man. He ran away from him and shouted that there was an assassin here. Gu Xiaobai asked Rexar for help, and shouted that they were being attacked by an assassin. Rexar read the Undead Lord's memoirs with interest. It was all detailed about his personal life. Gu Xiaobai asked Rexar to do something to help him. At this moment, the assassin's sword had already approached the core of Gu Xiaobai's body. However, at that moment, Rexar came to the rescue. He asked how Gu Xiaobai could have lost to him. It was a shadow assassin. The Headless Horseman was going to turn him into a ghost assassin. The shadow assassin was frightened. Rexar used the death possession technique.